Chapter 477. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. The people of Xiangyang district had returned home to reunite with their families. The recruits of the recruit camp had their morning training as usual and were dismissed after noon. They had half a day off to celebrate the festival with their families. Luo Yue, Meng Hun, Li Yun, and the rest gathered in the main hall of the district headquarters, preparing to celebrate the festival with Jiang Pingji. The 8-month-old Changxing was already quite sturdy. She smiled at everyone she saw, revealing her bright red gums and white teeth. Since the first time she pestered Feng Jin and was brought to the government office by him, Changxing came over a few times. The weather was cold. She wore 2 sweaters that Wei Jingxian knitted and 2 dresses with fur lining. Finally, she put on a thick hooded cloak. From afar, she looked like a chubby ball. Changxing was very restless. She wanted to pounce on someone she knew. If Feng Jin did not hold her firmly, the girl would definitely cause a ruckus. Happy New Year! Jiang Pingji heard Changxing's voice and came out to welcome her. Feng Jin could not help but smile bitterly. As a father, his position in his daughter's heart was not as high as his lord. He was not as likable as his lord. As a minister, he was not as important as his daughter in the lord's heart. Anyway, he would not be narcissistic and think that Jiang Pingji came out to welcome him. Jiang Pingji took Changxing, who was writhing restlessly, and weighed her. Changxing has become stronger. Once in her arms, Changxing immediately quieted down. She blinked her eyes obediently and looked innocent. She is used to pretending to be obedient in front of others. Feng Jin held Wei Jingxian's hand with his other hand and said, "It's windy outside. Let's go inside." It was freezing outside and the wind and snow were blowing. Charcoal pots were burning in the 4 corners of the hall. Warm air blew into their faces. Taking off the cloak to ward off the cold, Feng Jin found a seat and sat down. Wei Jingxian sat next to him. Not long after, everyone arrived one after another. Jiang Pingji let Changxing sit next to her and clapped her hands to signal the servants to serve the meal for the night. It was winter and the ingredients were limited. However, it was the first New Year's banquet after all. Jiang Pingji did not want to make it too shabby. After earnestly asking the audience in the streaming room for advice, Jiang Pingji sorted out the available game ingredients and tried to make the New Year's banquet as rich as possible. If it was in the past, the meat would be boiled in the hot soup after removing the stench, then it would be sliced and served on a plate. But TSK, she guaranteed that after tonight's banquet, everyone would gain 2 to 3 kilograms. Because it was a separate meal, the portion of each dish was not much, only enough for one person to eat 4 or 5 mouthfuls. Zhang Ping was tricked by Wei Ci to come over. He looked left and right but did not see any singing or dancing. He immediately felt a little dispirited. Now that he heard her say to serve the dishes directly, images of various kinds of cooked meat appeared in his mind, and his mouth felt greasy. However, when the plates of delicious food were served on the table, it made his mouth water. He immediately complained. "Why are the plates so small? Why are there so few dishes on the plates?" He glanced sideways and realized that the dishes on Wei Ci's side were basically untouched. He felt even more aggrieved. He had not eaten enough. Wei Ci's taste was light, but Zhang Ping's was the complete opposite of his. Noticing his friend's resentful gaze, Wei Ci pursed his lips and secretly moved the dishes that he had not touched to the table. "Don't eat too much. There's more to come." He lowered his voice and smiled gently. Zhang Ping secretly glanced at the young man on the main seat and muttered, "Is there no singing and dancing to liven things up?" Wei Ci blinked and asked, "Are you going to dance?" The district headquarters does not keep singers and dancers. You can't watch it even if you want to. Zhang Ping was speechless. Why did he feel that Wei Ci was getting more and more annoying? "Don't watch it then. It's boring anyway," he said. "The lord you chose is a gentle person." At that moment, Jiang Pingji was helplessly soaking a piece of mapo tofu in hot water to dilute the spiciness. She then crushed it on a soup spoon and brought it to the noisy Changxing's mouth. The little girl opened her mouth and slurped with satisfaction. She smacked her lips and looked at Jiang Pingji with a burning gaze. She still wanted to eat. An 8-month-old child was naturally noisy, but the Lord treated her patiently and coaxed her meticulously. She had been taking care of the child and had not even touched her chopsticks. Wei Ci was stunned for a moment. He looked up at Jiang Pingji on the main seat and looked a little absent-minded. She has always been very patient with children. When Changxing was half full, Jiang Pingji began to eat. On the other side, Wei Jingxian was also amazed. Her daughter had to be coaxed every day before she was willing to eat. Feng Jin also felt that this was too spoiling of the child. He tried to use a tough attitude, but it had little effect. It was rare for Changxing to sit obediently and wait to be fed. He always felt that he had given birth to a fake daughter. Feng Jin knew his daughter and said with a smile, "She's not obedient. She's obviously afraid." In front of Qiguan Rang and the others, she acted coquettishly and cute. In front of Meng Hun and the others, she was obedient and docile. At first, he did not understand. Later, Jiang Pengji revealed the secret. A child's intuition was sharper than that of an adult. Luo Yue and the others had the smell of blood on them. They were so afraid that they did not dare to fool around. Jiang Pengji was somewhat full. She asked the crowd, "Is anyone willing to add to the fun?" There were no singers and dancers, but they could watch their subordinates show off their talents. Everyone's faces stiffened and they secretly smiled bitterly. So they were waiting there. Changxing giggled as if she was making a fuss. In terms of talents, except for Changxing, everyone present was multi-talented. Even a martial artist like Meng Hun could perform a sword dance to show off his martial arts. It could barely be considered a performance. Feng Jin and the others were even more proficient in the 4 arts. They would never have stage fright. Xiangyang district was joyous and harmonious. The people seemed to have walked out of the dark clouds of the earthquake. They celebrated the new year and looked forward to the future. Far away in Hejian County, the troops celebrated the new year in the same way. It was a habit in the past, but this year it was somewhat tense. The source of everything was the prominent Zhang family in Hejian. Jiang Nongqin was originally arranging various matters for the New Year's banquet when she heard that the servants of the Lus had come to invite them. She raised her eyebrows and was secretly annoyed. The second lady sat on the main seat and said sarcastically, "Your manners, young lady, is missing. Instead of looking for her in the manor, you come to the second branch of the Lus to make trouble. Are you sure that my husband is not at home and you think that a group of women are easy to bully? It's the New Year's banquet today. Don't make it difficult for anyone." Madame Hu also came out to watch the show. She looked coldly at Zhang Zhaoshi opposite her. Zhang Zhaoshi was the legal wife of the Zhang family. She was dressed luxuriously and her makeup was elegant and graceful. She did not care about the second lady's words at all. There was a mean look in the corners of her eyes. She obviously came to ask for help, but she put on the posture of a protagonist. "I've looked for her again and again. That little B***Tsich is hiding in the Lu residence. If you don't hand her over today, this matter will not end. TSK, then you won't end it. However, the Lu residence is small. I'm afraid there's no place for Madame Zhang to stay." The second lady leaned on the table and did not take Zhang Zhaoshi seriously at all. Madame Hu covered her mouth with her sleeve to hide the gloating smile on her face. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin came over and bowed respectfully to greet her. The second lady asked, "Madame Zhang said that their young lady is hiding in our residence. Is that true?" Jiang Nongqin said expressionlessly, "No." Chapter 478. The second lady admired her armor, her eyes filled with disdain. "Mrs. Zhang, you've heard it. The Lu residence doesn't have the person you want. If you continue to be unreasonable and bully the second branch of the Lu residence, there will be no end to this. The Zhang family is considered a distinguished family. As for you, who do you think you are?" The second lady's words angered Mrs. Zhang so much that her face turned green. She glared at the second lady as if her eyes could spit venom. She took a deep breath and secretly clenched her fists. Her long fingernails dug into the flesh of her palms, and there was a sinister smile on her face. "Mrs. Meng, what do you mean? The person ran to your residence. You were the ones who abducted the young madam of the Zhang residence. Even if Lu Zhongqing was here, he would have to give us an explanation, much less your master. Mrs. Zhang mocked Gu Zhen in a strange tone. She purposely emphasized the word, Mrs. Meng. Everyone in Hejian County knew about the second lady, Gu Zhen's background. Her original husband was Meng Zhan from Zhangzhou. She was discontented and divorced her husband, Meng Zhan. She then turned around and married her brother-in-law. They had never seen such a shameless woman. A good woman should not marry a second husband. Why didn't the Lu clan capture a woman like Gu Zhen and drown her in the pond? The second lady, Gu Zhen, heard the way Mrs. Zhang addressed her. Her gloomy face darkened. Mrs. Zhang thought she had the upper hand and could not help but feel proud. After a woman marries, she should treat her husband as her god and be faithful to him. This is the model of women and the first virtue of women. I heard that when Mrs. Meng was still in Zhangzhou, she was discontented. Meng Zhan did not divorce you because he cared about the reputation of the two families. Instead, they separated. It's not that I want to talk too much, but Mrs. Meng should really read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and know what shame is. As soon as she said this, the entire room was silent. Mrs. Hu secretly glanced at the second lady. Her face was already extremely dark. The second lady took a sip of tea and suppressed the rising anger in her heart. Madame Zhang continued, "That daughter-in-law of mine is disobedient and absconds without permission. Such a wicked woman has tarnished the Zhang family's hundreds of years of reputation. We will naturally capture her back and interrogate her. As for you, Lady Meng, let me give you a piece of advice. You're still a slut yourself. Don't worry about other people's business." The second lady leaned against the table and threw the teacup in her hand at Mrs. Zhang's face. Seeing the tea and tea stains on Mrs. Zhang's face, the second lady laughed heartily. There was no sound in the room except for Mrs. Zhang's screams and the second lady's laughter that was as sweet as an aureole. I, Gu Zhen, was born into a truly prestigious family. When it comes to knowledge, it's not up to you, a girl from a poor family who has fallen from grace, to comment. The second madam took off her clothes and said arrogantly, "Zhang Zhaoshi, you are an orphan daughter. Marrying Zhang Zhaoshi's only son is indeed a great achievement for you. She has a low status, so she feels inferior and lowly. She regards her husband as heaven and earth. I can understand that. After all, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women is regarded as a standard by a woman who feels inferior and lowly. Do you think that I'm right?" Mrs. Zhang's eyes turned fierce. Jiang Nongqin, who had sensed the killing intent, reacted immediately. She went forward and captured Mrs. Zhang. The people from the Zhang residence saw that something was wrong and wanted to save her. They did not expect to be subdued by the Lu residence's servants. "You came to our Lu residence to make trouble. Why didn't Mrs. Zhang investigate the situation of our Lu residence? Also, you have to remember one thing. The second lady was arrogant and domineering. She walked up to Mrs. Zhang and pinched her chin with her armored fingers. Call me Mrs. Lu. If you call me wrong, someone will die." Mrs. Zhang was shocked. She immediately understood why the people she sent to the Lu residence to ask for Shengguan Wan had failed. Hearing that the second lady wanted to kill someone, she was shocked. Her heart thumped and her face turned pale. "How dare you!" She did not want to come and take Shengguan Wan herself, but Shengguan Wan left a divorce letter and ran away. It was a slap to Zhang Zhaoshi's face. Zhang Zhaoshi could not bear it and came to take Shengguan Wan on New Year's Day. She also wanted to teach the Lu residents a lesson. However, she forgot that no matter what kind of person she was, they were all *T in the face of absolute power. Ever since the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejian County, Gu Zhen was ostracized by a group of noble ladies. They avoided her in all activities. However, these noble ladies also forgot that Gu Zhen always liked to stay at home and did not bother to communicate with them. However, Gu Zhen did not show up for a long time, which gave everyone an illusion. Lu Shi's wife, Gu Zhen, was a remarried woman and a dirty woman who had gone through 2 husbands. She was not qualified to be on equal footing with them. The second lady asked in surprise, "Why wouldn't I dare? I wonder who gave Mrs. Zhang the illusion that I don't dare to?" After saying that, she suddenly pinched Mrs. Zhang's chin and forced her to come closer to her. The words that made Mrs. Zhang's body turn cold came out of the second lady's red and plump lips. You're just from a small family and your horizons are limited. You've read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and your already stupid brain has become even more stupid. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your husband. Ask him, if I brought people to smash the Zhang residence's door, would he dare to fight back? If he dares to fight back, I, Gu Zhen, will write my name backwards. Letting go of Mrs. Zhang's chin, Gu Zhen took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped her hands, as if she had touched something dirty. She pretended to say unintentionally, "You're indeed from a poor family. You're so petty." Mrs. Zhang was so angry that her face turned green. However, Nongqin's hand was like an eagle's claw that held her tightly. She could not break free. Mrs. Zhang is so proficient in the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Can you tell me, if a woman's body is seen by a strange man, should she die as an apology? The second lady returned to her seat of honor and leaned lazily against the table. I remember that before Mrs. Zhang got married, you made a living by sewing and often went out to deal with the merchants of the embroidery workshop. One year, you fell into the water and was rescued by a few passing villagers. TSK, I wonder how many green hats Mrs. Zhang has made your husband wear? The second lady covered her mouth with her sleeve, her eyes filled with evil intentions. This matter can't be hidden. Tomorrow, I'll go to Mrs. Zhang's house and ask if a shameless woman like you should be drowned in the pond to preserve Mrs. Zhang's reputation. After all, starvation is a small matter, but losing your chastity is a big deal. Mrs. Zhang should die to prove her innocence. Mrs. Zhang's face had already turned pale. She was afraid that the second lady would take her life. Although she did not think that Gu Zhen would dare to do so, her own life was more important. She could not take the risk. Send the guest out. The second lady's expression suddenly darkened. She waved her sleeve to send the guest out. Nongqin sent the distinguished Mrs. Zhang out as if she was catching a chick. Madame, who smiled and said, "Madam, you're really not afraid of trouble." Chapter 479. A good new year has been spoiled by this kind of person. What a disappointment. Madame, who stood up with some displeasure on her face. The second lady took a sip of tea with a strange look in her eyes. She called Jiang Nongqin over. "When will you depart?" Jiang Nongqin bowed her head and said respectfully, "In another 5 days, when everything in Hejian is settled, I'll depart for Xiangyang district." The second lady said, "Leave with one, or as soon as possible. If you delay, I'm afraid there will be changes." Jiang Nongqin's expression changed and she said hesitantly, "But madam, if that shrew comes again," the second lady said scornfully, "so what if she comes? If she comes again, I'll break her legs." Although Madame Zhang was here to make trouble, she was right because the missing Shangguan Wan was indeed hiding in the Lu residence. Shangguan Wan came to the Lu residence. Rather than saying that she left the divorce letter and ran away, it was more accurate to say that the second madam pitied her and gave her an idea and shelter. Otherwise, the grass on Shangguan Wan's grave would have been as tall as a person. The second lady had seen the smart and lively Shangguan Wan before. In her memory, this girl had always been a spoiled noble lady from a noble family. However, when they met again, she did not expect that such a lively and beautiful girl would be tortured to such a haggard and lifeless state. This matter had to start from 3 years ago. Shangguan Wan's mother passed away due to illness and her father then remarried. The second wife was a noble lady from Zhongzhou and was not from a noble family. She was just a second wife and did not have a high status requirement. The second wife was a daughter of a concubine and did not bring a rich dowry. The only highlight was probably a few sets of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. She claimed to be familiar with the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and acted according to the contents of the books. It was funny that her humble appearance made her sisters-in-law and mother-in-law feel comfortable. The old lady was flattered and casually asked the second wife to teach Shangguan Wan well and not neglect her. This second wife used a chicken feather as a token of authority and used the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to teach Shangguan Wan. How could Shangguan agree? As a noble lady from a noble family, she scoffed at the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. The mother and daughter who had married halfway were quite unhappy. At first, the Shangguan family was biased toward Shangguan. As time went by, the second wife became pregnant, so Shangguan's advantage was instantly reduced, and she was suppressed by the stepmother. The real trigger that led to Shangguan's tragedy was her first engagement. Originally, the man had said that he was willing to wait until she was out of mourning, but the stepmother had somehow heard that Shangguan had once fallen into a bandit's lair, and she even said that Shangguan was a girl who had lost her virginity. Of course, this was not said in public, but it was indeed spread. His mother had read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and deeply felt that the contents of the books were very reasonable. She increasingly felt that marrying a girl like Shangguan, who had lost her virginity, was a disgrace to the family, so she forcefully broke off the engagement. Shangguan's engagement was broken off because of her reputation as a girl who had lost her virginity. Shangguan became the joke of the entire Hejian county, and the Shangguan family was also deeply ashamed. The second wife was motherly and benevolent. She volunteered to teach Shangguan and arranged another marriage for her. As the legitimate son of the Zhang family in Hejian, his status was not as high as that of the Shangguan family, but it was not too bad. However, Shangguan later found out that her stepmother had sinister intentions. The stepmother and Zhang Zhaoshi, who was also Mrs. Zhang who had just come to make a scene, were on good terms. The legitimate son of the Zhang family turned out to be a naturally eunuch, and he was also weak and sickly. He was on his last breath and could not have sex at all. The stepmother arranged such a marriage for Shangguan in the name of her own good, and directly pushed Shangguan into the fire pit. However, this matter was not over yet. The sick legitimate son of the Zhang family was dying before the marriage. The stepmother persuaded Shangguan to marry and become a widow with the excuse that the marriage has been decided and Wan is the wife of the Zhang family. How can she marry someone else? Her words were full of sarcasm, and she repeatedly reminded Shangguan that she was a girl who had lost her virginity. Zhang Zhaoshi refused to accept it. She said that Shangguan had killed her son and insisted that Shangguan marry over to keep her son's chastity. Shangguan was isolated and helpless. Almost all of her family stood on the side of her stepmother. She could only be forced to marry into the Zhang family miserably. After the invalid died, she had to wear a wedding dress and marry a rooster. On the second day of marriage, she had to endure the sarcasm of her mother-in-law. As the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejian, Shangguan's life became more and more difficult. Not only her, but those noble ladies who had been involved in bandits were more or less affected. The stepmother was on good terms with Zhang Zhaoshi, and she inadvertently mentioned that if a woman could not bear loneliness, she might commit adultery to vent her lust. This was also an act of destroying one's reputation and chastity. In Zhongzhou, unyielding widows would cut off their fingers to show their determination to keep their chastity. Zhang Zhaoshi was worried that Shangguan was young and might make her son a cuckold. She hoped that Shangguan could also cut off her fingers so that she could not bear loneliness and commit adultery. How could Shangguan agree? But she was alone in the Zhang family, and no one in the Shangguan family thought that she was innocent. If she did not think of a way, she really could not live. Zhang Zhaoshi pressed her step by step, and Shangguan clenched her teeth and refused to agree. How much pressure was she under? Finally, taking advantage of the opportunity to go up the mountain to worship Buddha, she simply chose to commit suicide. In the end, she did not succeed, because she was stopped by the stepmother. After listening to Shangguan's experience, the stepmother could not help but think of herself, who was once alone and helpless. Her heart softened, and she agreed to save her. After a few days, Zhang Zhaoshi's patience ran out, and she was ready to ask someone to cut off Shangguan's fingers. She left a divorce letter and successfully escaped from the Zhang family with the help of the Lu troop. To be safe, she did not live in the Lu family, but in the troop camp instead. She hid there for more than half a year. Half a month ago, her traces were accidentally leaked, and Zhang Zhaoshi repeatedly sent people to ask for her. These people were all sent away, and in the end, Zhang Zhaoshi had no choice but to personally bring people over. Because of this, Jiang Nongqin was not in the mood to eat the New Year's banquet, and her face had been gloomy. Shang Guanwan had long changed out of her noble lady attire into coarse civilian clothes. She was now adapting well in the troop. Sister Nongqin, those people from the Lu family have left, right? A trace of fear flashed across her face, and she looked unusually nervous and fearful. She had completely lost her previous bravery and flamboyance. We have to leave for the north in advance, Jiang Nongqin said. Lady Wan, let's go together. If we stay here, sooner or later, we won't be able to hide. She could hide the first time, but she could not hide forever. Shang Guanwan had left a divorce letter, but Zhang Zhaoshi had already determined that even if Shang Guanwan died, she would still be their soul. If she was caught and brought back, she would probably be tortured severely. In less than 10 days to half a month, the news of her sudden death would spread. In the past 2 years, Jiang Nongqin had saved many women who had been forced into a corner. They were all victims of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Now that the world was already so difficult, why did they still impose so many cruel shackles on innocent women? In this era where the clan's law was above the law, if the clan wanted to catch an unchaste woman and drown her in a pond, it would really be a dead end. Chapter 480. Everyone wanted to live, and Shang Guanwan was no exception. But after experiencing those dark months, she would rather die than go back. Are we going north to look for Brother Lanting? Ever since she agreed to go north with them, Shang Guanwan felt as if a heavy burden had been removed from her shoulders. She felt light and at ease. Yes. Jiang Nongqin nodded and added, the journey will be more dangerous. Lady Wan, you must be mentally prepared. Shang Guanwan had vaguely heard about the situation in the north. She knew that the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group were fighting, but could they be more terrifying than the Zhang residents? Her eyes darkened and she said with determination, don't worry, Sister Nongqin. I'm not afraid. It was better to do this sooner rather than later. The troops were ready to depart in 2 days, which was 3 days earlier than the original plan. Shang Guanwan had been hiding in the troop camp for more than half a year. In the beginning, she was a little timid. Her mental state and emotions were very unstable, and her body was very weak. Later, Jiang Nongqin took her to learn martial arts to strengthen her body. In addition, Shang Guanwan had a certain foundation, so she learned very quickly. Even if he couldn't kill or capture them, at least he had the ability to protect himself. Zhang Zhaoshi was wronged in the Lu mansion. When she went back, she cried and complained to her husband, adding fuel to the fire. She thought that her husband would help her for the sake of her dead son, but he slapped Zhang Zhaoshi in the face instead. Not only that, he even scolded her for being short-sighted and wanted to drag her to the Lu residence to apologize. Zhang Zhaoshi was dumbfounded. Anger rose in her heart, and she cried and scolded her husband. Why should I apologize to an unchaste woman? That Gu Zhen is not a good person. She is fickle. Don't tell me that even you have been seduced by her? She's harboring that little bitch, Shang Guanwan. Do you want our son to die with everlasting regret? Zhang Zhaoshi's husband was also confused. He didn't know when his wife had become so unreasonable. He smiled coldly and said word by word. You ask me why? Just because she came from a prestigious family, just because her husband was the magistrate of Chongzhou. In today's world, if someone wants you dead, you can't live. Do you understand? Look at it the other way round. What do you have? Let's not talk about whether she was harboring her daughter-in-law or not. The key is, do you have any evidence? Where are the witnesses and material evidence? You don't have anything at all, yet you dare to come here and ask for him. What a shrew! Zhang Zhaoshi still wanted to refute, but her husband said again, you should stop interacting with the second wife of the Shangguan family in the future. Look at how disgusting you are now. You're torturing your daughter-in-law at home, but I'm turning a blind eye. I only hope that you don't go too far. Although Madame Shangguan doesn't love her anymore, she still has the blood of Shangguan in her bones. What right do you have to torture her to death? Zhang Zhaoshi opened her mouth and said awkwardly after a while, I'm her mother-in-law. Her husband chuckled coldly. She has already written the divorce papers and gone through the official channels. What kind of mother-in-law are you? You didn't give birth to her, nor did you raise her. What right do you have to decide her life and death? Just because of those books that you hold in your hands all day long? If you have the time, read the words of the real sages, and stop reading these crooked things. Zhang Zhaoshi's husband said this not because he thought that the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was bad, but because his mother was also a remarried woman. If he acknowledged the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, wouldn't he be scolding his old mother? Looking at Zhang Zhaoshi's absent-minded expression, he curled his lips and left. Zhang Zhaoshi suddenly broke down, with an expression that looked like she was about to cry. Her husband was determined to make her apologize to Gu Zhen. If she did not agree, her life in the residence would be difficult in the future. The legitimate son she gave birth to was sickly and naturally castrated, but the sons of her husband and other concubines were smart and healthy. Because of this, her husband felt that it was all Zhang Zhaoshi's fault that the legitimate son was handicapped. Ever since the legitimate son was born, he rarely entered her room. Her belly had never moved, but the sons and daughters of the concubines jumped out one after another. In the morning of the 2nd day of the new year, the troops were ready to leave. Before leaving, Lady Gu Zhen invited Shang Guanwan to watch a good show. Shang Guanwan looked at the plain and completely unfamiliar woman in the mirror in disbelief. She deeply felt the magic of Lady Gu Zhen's hands. My sister taught her. It's a good skill, the second lady said in a flat tone. I wonder what kind of show you want me to watch, madam? Shang Guanwan asked. The second lady said, you'll know in a while. Wait behind the screen and just watch the show. Not long after, the gatekeeper reported that Zhang Zhaoshi had come. Shang Guanwan subconsciously tensed up and clenched her fists tightly. Lady Zhang, what a rare guest. Why are you here? The second lady's voice passed through the screen and reached Shang Guanwan's ears. She said sarcastically, I don't have the young madam of the Zhang residence here. Do you want to bring people to search me today? After a while, Shang Guanwan heard the familiar voice of her former mother-in-law. Her usual sarcasm was replaced by flattery. She was humble and submissive. It was impossible to imagine how powerful and arrogant she was in the Zhang residence. But Shang Guanwan secretly bit her lower lip. She felt inexplicably carefree when she heard Zhang Zhaoshi flattering and apologizing to the second lady and calling her Madame Lu so intimately. The second lady's reaction was indifferent. She only responded impatiently after the other party said more than 10 sentences. Even though she was so neglectful, the other party still carefully flattered her. After hearing a lot of flattery, the second lady finally showed mercy and sent Zhang Zhaoshi away. The other party felt as if she had been pardoned. When the people of the Zhang residence had completely left, Shang Guanwan quietly walked out of the screen. The second lady said, Did you hear what was said just now clearly? Shang Guanwan nodded. Yes. The second lady took a sip of tea. The bright red rouge on her lips was still gorgeous. She opened her mouth slightly. In terms of prestige and status, the Lu residence is not much higher than the Zhang residence in Hejin. But you saw how she was just now. Why do you think that old woman is so submissive and flatters me everywhere? Shang Guanwan thought for a while. Because of Uncle Lu? Not because of my brother-in-law, but because of the troops in my brother-in-law's hands. The second lady said with a smile, We hit it off at first sight. I feel very sorry for what you've been through, so I'm here to say a few words. If you hold military power one day, those people will also flatter you shamelessly. Only when you're strong can you not be bullied by others. All external forces are unreliable. Now, you can only rely on yourself. Shang Guanwan was the daughter of the Shangguan family's legal wife. No one dared to provoke her in the past. She had the highest status among the noble ladies in Hejian. Because she was doted on by the Shangguan family, everyone was afraid of the power behind her. But when Shang Guanwan lost the love of her family, she was violated and treated so harshly that she was almost forced to commit suicide. The second lady made it clear, and Shangguan Wan was a sensible person, so she understood what she meant. Chapter 481. Shangguan Wan was hesitant, and her face showed that she was struggling. The second lady said, although you despise those evil books, you still acknowledge them after all. Shangguan Wan's expression froze, and she quickly denied, how is that possible? How could she agree with those books that were full of fallacious theories? The second lady asked her, if that's the case, why do you doubt that you can't do it? Shangguan Wan was dumbfounded and speechless. After a while, her hesitant eyes became firm, and she bowed to the second lady. Thank you for your advice, madam. The second lady continued, the Shangguan family has your stepmother, so you can't get their protection. The Lu residents can't always protect you. If you want to get rid of Zhang completely, you can only rely on yourself in the future. Do your best and remember to take care of yourself. Shangguan Wan's eyes reddened, and she gritted her teeth and nodded. Thank you, madam. She had also thought that if her mother hadn't suddenly died of illness, she wouldn't have ended up like this. At least, she wouldn't have been tortured like this. But on second thought, what was the point of resenting these things? There were no ifs in this world, and reality was reality. Instead of thinking about the past, it was better to think about one's future. The second lady watched Shangguan Wan leave and secretly shook her head. If it was the old Shangguan Wan, she wouldn't have needed to point these things out. However, after being tortured by her stepmother and the Zhang mansion, her pride had been broken in just a short 1 or 2 years. The 4 self-accomplishment classics for women that Shangguan Wan despised had also subtly poisoned her. Now, she hoped that this child could be reborn and have another exciting life. Thinking of this, the second lady smiled gently, like a delicate flower in the water. You really like to meddle in other people's business. Madam, whose lazy voice came from behind. The second lady said calmly, I just see my own shadow in this little girl. She had her sister to protect her, but Shangguan Wan had nothing, so she couldn't help but soften. Rather than saying that she was helping Shangguan Wan, it was better to say that she was helping her own shadow. Zhang Zhaoshi left the Lu residence unwillingly and resentfully. She heard that a troop of the Lu residents was about to leave Hejian County. She tensed up, and a trace of malice flashed across her face. After a while, she said fiercely, Go after them. Her intuition told her that Shangguan Wan must be among these troops. That little bitch wanted to fish in troubled waters and escape from Hejian County. Seeing that they were about to leave the territory of Hejian County, Shangguan Wan was in high spirits, but the dense sound of hooves could be heard behind her. Don't be afraid. Jiang Nongqin's expression was still calm. She comforted Shangguan Wan in a low voice. I'll deal with them. The 100 or so people who were chasing after them were the servants of the Zhang residence. Behind them was a speeding carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted. Zhang Zhaoshi was sitting inside with a gloomy face. Hand over the little bitch, Shangguan Wan. Zhang Zhaoshi didn't care about the troops at all, because they were just servants and didn't even have the right to talk to her. Jiang Nongqin scoffed. She raised her hand and said in a hoarse voice, Get into formation and face the enemy. As soon as he finished speaking, the troops, who were originally carrying heavy loads and hurrying on their way, formed a defensive formation as fast as they could. Hundreds of longbows were drawn and arrows were aimed at the people of the Zhang residence. Seeing this, Zhang Zhaoshi's face was so gloomy that ink seemed to drip out. Jiang Nongqin could be considered as half a disciple of Jiang Pingji. She would fight whenever there was a disagreement. If she could fight, she would never talk nonsense. Zhang Zhaoshi, who was weak in combat, could at most rely on the servants around her to act like a tyrant. Jiang Nongqin was not afraid of fighting with her fists. She asked Zhang Zhaoshi in a hoarse voice, Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here? Cold sweat broke out on Zhang Zhaoshi's forehead. She secretly held the crossbar of the carriage door tightly. Even if she felt that a group of servants would not dare to hurt her, the suffocating murderous intent still scared her. Facing hundreds of arrows that were pointed straight at her head, she felt that if her answer was not satisfactory, she might turn into a hornet's nest in the next second. She almost stopped breathing. She was afraid that the servants in front of her would harm her. In his heart, he was secretly angry. These servants of the Lu residence actually dared to be so arrogant. "Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here?" Jiang Nongqin asked again with a calm expression. After a while, Zhang Xiaoshi swallowed her anger and said with a twisted face, "No, I was wrong." When Jiang Nongqin heard this, a faint sarcasm appeared at the corner of her lips. She raised her hand and ordered the troops to put away their longbows. Zhang Xiaoshi looked at Nongqin's attire, and a trace of contempt flashed across her eyes. From her point of view, Nongqin was the most unladylike woman. She should be drowned in a pig cage and ridden on a wooden donkey. "Let's go!" Jiang Nongqin ordered a troop to cover the rear in case Zhang Xiaoshi attacked from behind. The rest of the people retreated in an orderly manner. Shangguan Wan waited at the rear with rapid breathing. Seeing this situation, she slowly breathed a sigh of relief. A woman who bullies the weak and fears the strong is the easiest to get rid of. Jiang Nongqin came back with a cold face and concluded. Shangguan Wan burst out laughing, and her nervousness disappeared. I suddenly realized that Sister Nongqin's way of doing things is very similar to Brother Lanting's. How can I be compared to Lang Jun? Jiang Nongqin shook her head and turned over to get on the horse. "Let's go." Shangguan Wan had learned horsemanship and archery when she was still in her boudoir. Later on, when the kidnappers happened, the residents hired a martial arts teacher for her. She also knew martial arts, not to mention that she had stayed in the troops' camp for more than half a year. If she fought seriously, some of the male troops might not be her match. Of course, since Shangguan Wan had never seen blood on her hands, she would definitely be the one to die if they fought to the death. The journey to the north was rather difficult. The surrounding refugees not only coveted their clothes and food, but also the women in the camp. When they were approaching the border of Wanzhou, even Shangguan Wan had killed a few people. The situation is unstable. There is a war in the north. The Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group are fighting fiercely. After more than half a month, the 2,000 troops had lost a lot of weight. Shangguan Wan, who had always been pampered, had also lost weight. Her skin had darkened, but she had become much more capable. Shangguan Wan had a saber hanging on her waist. She was dressed in clothes that could barely keep out the cold, and she wore a coarse cloak. Even so, most of the people who are implicated are innocent people. Shangguan Wan's face was gloomy. She really could not relax in such a hellish scene. Along the way, the increasingly harsh and cruel reality taught her a harsh lesson. In the outside world, there were no luxurious clothes and no tall buildings. Corpses that died of illness or froze to death by the roadside were one after another. Birds that could not find food in winter fed on the corpses, and they would peck a complete corpse until it was broken. If the battles in the inner chamber were like needles hidden in silk floss, and the tongue was the most powerful weapon, then the battles in the outside world were different. There were too many factors that could threaten the lives of the common people. The bitter cold of winter, the shortage of food, the bandits who spread rumors of killing, the two rebel armies that fought everywhere and injured the people by mistake. Not only that, but they also had to guard against their companions. Chapter 482. Jiang Nongqin looked at Shangguan Wan's serious side profile and sighed secretly. If a woman's growth had to be built on injuries, it would be too cruel. After a short rest, everyone in the troops set off again. After the 5th day of the new year, Xiangyang district recovered from the joy of the new year. Restaurants, tea houses, and other shops opened one by one. The people in the district headquarters also began to actively prepare for the battle after the spring plowing. The training of the new recruits became stricter and stricter. At the same time, they had to recruit soldiers and horses everywhere. In other words, the subordinates were still working overtime. As the Lord, Jiang Pingji was still slacking off. However, there was one more person slacking off with her. It was Zhang Ping from the Mahist family. As the saying goes, a pillow comes after a nap. Jiang Pingji was still complaining that the scholars from the Mahist family were all dead. There was not even a shadow of them. Then, Zhang Ping came to her on his own initiative. After careful observation, She found that Zhang Ping was very intelligent and was a promising talent. Therefore, she brought Zhang Ping with her all day long and taught him about the woodworking workshop. My lord's wonderful ideas are really admirable. For an otaku who was addicted to mechanisms, what could be more attractive than a variety of model figurines? Jiang Pengji took him to see the models of various siege weapons. After her selection and training, the craftsman in the woodworking workshop could already make some simple models of the weapons according to the blueprints. These models were not just for show. If they were enlarged according to the scale, they would be real siege weapons. Zhang Ping did not know that attacking and defending a city could be played in this way. It was very interesting. Zhang Ping, who was originally indifferent to this matter, was now also interested. How to make the defending party pay the least price to defend the city. How to make the attacking party pay the least price to take down the city. His mind was full of these thoughts. He even threw aside the water wheel that he had been studying previously. If Jiang Pengji had not accidentally seen his things, he did not know when the water wheel would see the light of day again. What is this? Jiang Pengji poked the water wheel model. Did you make it? Zhang Ping was startled for a moment. He smiled and said, yes. I saw that the farmers had a hard time irrigating, so I thought about how to save manpower and make irrigation more convenient. However, I tried several times, but I always failed. You see, it's not smooth, but I don't know what the reason is. Zhang Ping's ambition was to be a hermit, with a beautiful wife and a crane, living a carefree life. The direction of his research was also biased towards the livelihood of the people, unlike Jiang Pengji. Apart from improving farming tools in the beginning, the rest of her research was applied to war. Jiang Pengji said, let me take a look. The water wheel was indeed a very bold design. To the viewers in the live broadcast room, it was very normal. However, in today's world, it was truly shocking. If Zhang Ping's research was successful and it was put into practice, who knew how many people would benefit? Jiang Pengji was very concerned about the people's livelihood. Naturally, she hoped that the water wheel would succeed. In addition to the water wheel, Zhang Ping also had a pulley for fetching water. This thing had been around for a long time, but it was not widely used. Zhang Ping planned to use it to fetch water. His explanation was also very simple. Some people lived high up in the mountains, but the rivers were at the foot of the mountains. If they wanted to drink water, they had to go down the mountain to fetch water, which was time-consuming and laborious. However, if they installed this pulley and tied a hemp rope to a wooden bucket, they could directly throw it down the mountain, which was convenient and laborious. It could also be installed on the wells, making it easier for the commoners to fetch water. It's a good idea. Jiang Pengji nodded in agreement. She did not care how it was to be installed on the mountain, but the wells could be installed. Previously, when she looked at the files of the district headquarters, several cases of well drowning were written on it. When the victim was fetching water, the bucket was too heavy, which caused his center of gravity to shift forward. He accidentally fell into the mouth of the well and lost his life. If it was installed on the mouth of the well, the commoners only had to squat by the well to fetch water safely. The safety factor would increase significantly. In the dead of winter, Feng Jin and the rest looked coldly at Zhang Ping as he busied himself. He led the craftsmen of the woodworking workshop to install the pulley for the wells in Xiangyang district and taught the commoners seriously how to use it. It was still in the dead of winter. What kind of temptation could make a hermit who was detached from worldly affairs willingly do such hard labor? Why are you all looking at me like that? Jiang Pengji comfortably drank hot tea to warm herself. She planned to dry some dried fruits next year so that she could make tea in winter. When she raised her head, a few of her subordinates looked at her strangely. Jiang Pengji felt a little creeped out. Have the improved seeds for spring plowing been distributed? Have the farming tools been arranged? Have the cattle been allocated? Have the fields of each household been counted? If not, why are you looking at me? Get to work. Everyone sneered in their hearts. Then they buried their heads in work. They had never seen such a shameless person. This person was actually their lord. The only one who did not find it strange was probably Wei Ci. Ever since he decided to push Zhang Ping into the fire pit, he knew that such a day would come. As a friend, he did not wish for Zhang Ping's talents to be buried in the wilderness. In today's world, one could not live in peace by hiding. With such thoughts in mind, Wei Ci filtered suitable candidates with a clear conscience. He planned to conquer Fengyi County after the spring plowing and send letters to his companions one by one. As an injured person who was still recuperating, he could not work for too long. He could not bear to see a group of colleagues working day and night. The only way was to find someone to share the work. There was a shortage of talents. If it was not for Zhang Ping's incompetence in government affairs, he would have pulled him over to work like a slave. The work in the government office was quite heavy. The only praiseworthy thing was the food in the small kitchen. I like this braised pork with vinegar sauce the most. It's sweet and sour. I really don't know where my lord found such a good chef. Compared to the food I've eaten before, it's like chaff. There were 10 small plates on the table in front of Su Ku, enough to fill up 4 to 5 mouthfuls of food. Although they were all meat dishes, there were 2 bowls of vegetable soup that tasted great. Feng Jin silently agreed with this. Hiding behind his sleeves, he secretly touched his somewhat bloated belly. It was so delicious that they wished they could freeload 3 meals a day at the district headquarters. Only delicious food could eliminate their resentment of working overtime. Jiang Pingji's food was no different from that of her subordinates, but she had a large appetite. The amount of each meal was 3 to 4 times that of others. I suddenly thought of something, Jiang Pingji said. Why don't we secretly open a restaurant? Everyone was drinking tea to aid digestion after eating. When they heard that Jiang Pingji wanted to stir up trouble again, their nerves tensed up. However, Wei Ci gently answered, "Why did my lord have such an idea? Those in power should not compete with the people for benefits. Otherwise, if the government and the business combined, how could the people's businesses survive? If his lord took the lead in doing so, it would be difficult to suppress the trend in the future." Chapter 483. What did they think? Was there a need to ask this question? Jiang Pingji's suggestion was undoubtedly a divine weapon to increase their favorability. If favorability could be quantified, she might be able to see that the favorability of her subordinates had soared to the highest level of loyalty. No matter what happened in the future, they would not easily change their minds. Jiang Pingji thought about it and added, "If we open a restaurant, we need waiters, people who do chores in the backyard, and shopkeepers who manage the restaurant. A medium-sized restaurant needs to employ at least 20 to 30 people. Orphans, widows, or those who are disabled because of the war can find a suitable position to support their families if they don't have a job. After all, if we ask them to farm, it's really difficult for them." Everyone was touched by Jiang Pingji's words. Wei Ci showed a dazed expression and fell into his memories. Fighting with the people for benefits was indeed criticized, but what if the money she earned was all used on the orphans of the war and the elderly who had no one to support them? And the soldiers who were disabled because of injuries, how would they make a living after leaving the battlefield? In Wei Ci's memory, other than the person in front of him, it seemed that no feudal lord would take these problems seriously. Many feudal lords just handed matters over to their subordinates, just to fight for a good reputation of benevolence and love for the people. With a good reputation, their goal would be achieved. As for how the future would develop, they did not have the energy to care at all. This led to a period of time when the situation slightly relaxed. The silver allocated for retirement would be exploited layer by layer. In the end, only a few coins would fall into the hands of orphans and widows. But Her Majesty was different. She really did it. It was just that she did the best, but her reputation was the worst. Why was it like this? Wei Ci looked at Jiang Pingji in a daze. Because this person's temperament was too casual and arrogant, she only needed to capture anyone who coveted this batch of pension money, and let the greedy person gather 10 times or even 100 times the amount of money to return. Her attitude was unyielding, and whoever dared to disobey her, without exception, would end up with their heads rolling on the ground. Unfortunately, these people had a glib tongue and were eloquent. They smeared her reputation behind her back. What about Her Majesty? My time is precious, I don't care to argue with ants. In this life, he would be the one to argue. While Wei Ci was in a daze, Feng Jin had already bowed with his hands folded in front. My lord's action is a good deed. Jin will naturally support it with all my might. If the generals and soldiers unfortunately died in battle, their orphans and widows would have someone to rely on and provide for them. The disabled soldiers would also be able to make a living. If this is feasible, I believe the soldiers will be completely at ease and not have to worry about the future. This action was benevolent to Feng Jin and the others, but to Jiang Pingji, it was a matter of course. The soldiers were willing to risk their lives for her, so she naturally had to be worthy of their loyalty. Feng Jin and the rest were moved by Jiang Pingji's growth. The audience in the streaming room also started discussing it. Lao Cg Lianmeng. I started following the live stream not long after it started. Looking back, the streamer has really grown a lot. It wasn't that the host wasn't good in the past, it was just that she was too tough and self-centered in the past. Now, she was becoming more and more like a benevolent ruler, more and more in line with what an excellent ruler should be like. For the people in troubled times, this was a blessing. Qijing Pokalai. I hope that when I'm old, I can still continue following the live stream with my grandchildren and tell them how outstanding the streamer is. Although she's just Jiang Pingji, she led a group of subordinates to conquer the world and gave the people a peaceful and contented life. Live stream, you must not let us down. You are these beasts. If I were a commoner, it would definitely be a very happy thing to be protected by the streamer like this. Buting. I believe that the streamer can become a true emperor, unprecedented and unsurpassed. Wangban Yinjing, I hope that in my lifetime, I can see my lord rule the world. The live stream room was full of praises. Even Jiang Pingji, who was as thick-skinned as the corner of the city wall, felt somewhat embarrassed. If that's the case, then I'll get someone to organize the menu. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said hesitantly, the income from the restaurant business is all used to provide for orphans and widows. In the beginning, the scale is small and the income is not high, so others naturally don't care about it. But in the future, with these unique flavors and dishes, I think the business of the restaurant will not be too bad, and the income will naturally increase. I'm a little worried. If the income was a few coins, who would care about it? But what if it was easily tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of strings of coins? Jiang Pingji did not think that anyone would not be tempted. Liyun was a little naive. From his point of view, no matter how good the business of the restaurant was, how high could the income be? Not to mention that the restaurant had not even opened yet, but his lord was already worried that someone would embezzle money in the future. He asked, the income is used to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers who died in the war, as well as compensation for the bereaved. Would there really be beasts who would embezzle money? Wei Ci smiled and said, even Han Mei said that those people are beasts. How can we use the thinking of ordinary people to measure them? I think that my lord's worries are not without reason. It's better to be prepared for a rainy day. Since this is for the good of the soldiers, so that they will no longer have to worry about the future when they go to the battlefield, then this matter cannot be treated casually. Punish those who are greedy, lest the soldiers' hearts turn cold. What does my lord think? Of course, Zixiao's words make sense. Jiang Pingji raised her brows. Currently, we only have one base in Xiangyang district. The scale of the restaurant is not large, and the income is not high. If we use this bit of money to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers, everyone will think it is absurd. How about this? I will donate 20,000 strings of coins as the initial compensation. If it is not enough, I will add more in the future. Wei Ci's fingers trembled. He almost could not keep the expression on his face. 20,000 strings of coins? Had his lord ever been so extravagant? Didn't she always want to break a coin into 4 coins to use? Looking around, it seemed that no one was surprised. This was 20,000 strings of coins, not 2 coins. Others did not know, but Suku was very clear about how rich his lord's private treasury was. Not to mention 20,000 strings of coins, even if it was 200,000 strings of coins, she could still take it out. Sai, who asked the people of the North Borderline to be stupid, rich, and squandering. They were too rich, they were too extravagant, they were practically fighting to buy glass tea sets and jewelry, no one could stop them. Not only that, the business of wool products in Chongzhou was also not bad. In a short period of time, they had accumulated tens of thousands of strings of coins. The first batch of silver was mostly used for the construction of Xiangyang district, the purchase of rations, armor, and the manufacture of weapons. The second batch of silver was the one that truly entered the lord's private treasury. After receiving it, his lord generously gave each of her subordinates a big red packet. Even Feng Jin's family's Chongqing was given a 1-month gift. It was unbelievably extravagant. If there was a ranking list of the feudal lord's wealth in the future, his lord would probably occupy the top spot all year round. Jiang Pingji looked around. Then this matter. Chapter 484. It was easy to make mistakes in this matter. Only those who were meticulous and determined could do it. If it was done well, it would be a great plus. The things at the beginning were not complicated. Wei Ci could handle it with his current physical condition. When the workload increased in the future, his body would probably recover. More importantly, she felt that Wei Ci could be trusted. He had the ambition to rule the world. Money could not blind him. Wei Ci accepted it without hesitation. He was thinking of formulating a relatively complete compensation process. I will not let you down. Combining the experience from his previous life and the analysis and improvement in this life, he felt that he was the most suitable person to do this. Yes, remember to get Xiaoyu to approve the 20,000 strings of coins. Jiang Pingji did not value money. She often used her private treasury as the public treasury and left it to the accountant to manage. Suke did not know whether to laugh or cry at her attitude. Throughout the ages, which leader did not use the public treasury as his private treasury? His lord was capricious and reversed the roles. It was reasonable that Jiang Pingji did not feel distressed about the money. It came from the strong wind. Why would she feel distressed? Speaking of which, the north borderline had already sold 4 batches of glass. Jiang Pingji felt that she could slow down and whet the appetite of the fat sheep. After the first month, the weather was still so cold. The entire Xiangyang district had an atmosphere of impending war. The people faintly felt that the atmosphere was subtle. The government office was busy again. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder go first. War was not only a contest of military strength, tactics, and wisdom, but also a contest of financial resources and logistics. Rations and fodder, horses, siege equipment, armors, weapons. Every one of them burned money. Especially defensive armors and weapons used in war, they cost a lot of money. Jiang Pingji could not let her soldiers go to the battlefield in plain clothes and holding a wooden spear. That was not a battlefield. It was queuing up to talk to the king of hell. It was sending the enemy's head. Jiang Pingji heard the statistics in the account book given by Su Ku and secretly said, poor. If she could make armor here, Jiang Pingji squinted her eyes and thought of the plan she made when she first came to Xiangyang district. Xiangyang district was very likely to contain iron ore. However, whether the iron ore was real or not was her personal judgment. She could not be completely sure. Once she had some free time, she planned to bring some people to investigate. If there really was an iron mine, it would save a lot of money. After the long winter training, the new soldiers had already adapted to the heavy training. Coupled with the ample food and water supply, not only did the soldiers not lose weight, but they also became stronger. The old clothes that originally fit them seemed a little tight on their bodies. Before, he couldn't even carry a load for 3 to 5 miles, but now he could carry a log and run a round trip. Therefore, a person's potential was like a sponge that could be squeezed out with some squeezing. There was no need to be lenient when it came to training these burly male soldiers. As long as they didn't die, then they would work them to death. Not only did the recruits and veterans have to undergo all kinds of physical training, but they also had to practice military formations. In ancient times, the methods of transmitting information were too backward, especially in a place like a battlefield that was constantly changing. Military formations could maximize the effectiveness of the soldiers' cooperation in battle, such as cutting the enemy's formation, surrounding them, outflanking them, and strategically retreating. All these required extremely strong execution. Jiang Pingji would not allow even one deserter from her army. As long as you're told to charge, you'll have to do it no matter what. If you were told to retreat, even if the enemy's head was in your hands, you couldn't be greedy for the spoils of battle. They had to follow orders strictly and strictly. Over and over, they had to repeat it in a dull manner until they developed a reflexive reaction that could immediately act when they heard orders. After the first month of the lunar year, the people in the men's camp clearly felt that the atmosphere was much more solemn than before. Their training was enhanced and their meals were better. The sky was pitch black. As soon as the military camp's whistle sounded, the soldiers had to get up and put on their clothes as quickly as possible and gather at the drill ground. In the beginning, most of the soldiers couldn't do it. After a long time, those who couldn't do it before could also do it. Of course, there was another important reason why they would put in so much effort in training. They were stimulated by the hundreds of female soldiers in the women's camp. Ever since the mocking incident in the recruit camp, Jiang Pingji would post an explanation notice every few days. The people of Xiangyang district were skeptical at the beginning, but they became skeptical later on. Some families felt that the girls were a hindrance, so they made up their minds and sent the more cumbersome girls at home to the women's camp. The number of people in the women's camp slowly increased to 600, finally reaching the expected number. Jiang Pingji didn't let others take over the training of the women's camp. Instead, she took the field herself. Upon seeing the situation, Su Ku secretly shed tears of sympathy for the young ladies in the women's camp. He was one of the few people who knew about his lord's ability to ruthlessly destroy flowers. As expected, the people in the women's camp who were looked down upon by the outside world and even had a contemptuous attitude officially ushered in a hellish life. The training load was only 20% less than that of the male soldiers. For these thin and weak girls, it was cruel. Jiang Pingji was usually easy to talk to, but once she entered the instructor mode, unless the female soldiers couldn't stand the exhaustion and fainted, or there were other unavoidable circumstances, she wouldn't show any mercy at all. As long as they were awake, as long as their noses could still breathe, even if they had to crawl on the ground to the finish line. The viewers in the streaming room couldn't take it anymore. Streamer, if you treat cute girls like this, be careful of the wrath of the heavens. Streamer V. When I entered the military school at the age of 5 or 6, the training I went through was heavier than this. In today's world, cute girls are used to be bullied. Without the ability to protect themselves, they can only become the playthings of others. If you pity them, it's not love but harm. If they suffer a little now, they will suffer less in the future. I love them, do you understand? If you love them, then train them to their death. This was Jiang Pingji's consistent dogma. Lao Ciji Lianmeng, children don't understand the streamer's love, but they will understand in the future. Kizero Bupaba, although it's a little distressing, what the streamer said is also right. In troubled times, no one can protect anyone. If they don't want to be treated as a reproduction machine, an item to be bought and sold, or a reserve of food, these girls can only rely on themselves to work hard. Looking at the content of the streaming, almost all of them cried when they were kidnapped by their families. They were obviously abandoned by their families. Even if they didn't suffer with the streamer, they would still be tortured at home. Jin Tian Sangin, I hope they can learn something from the streamer. No matter how weak a grass is, it can still overcome the oppression of a stubborn rock. A group of girls ranging in age from 13 to 16 cried miserably while gritting their teeth to train. Long-distance running with weights was fine. They could still dawdle and slack off for a while on the way. Weapon training was miserable. If one's posture was not standard, Jiang Pingji would use a rolled-up whip to help correct it. Her attitude was extremely strict. Chapter 485. What was annoying was that after soaking in the medicinal herbs provided by the military camp, their muscles were no longer so sore. They couldn't even find an excuse to be lazy. It was still winter. If they didn't want to freeze to death, they could only keep exercising to generate heat. If they fell behind, they might be buried in the snow and freeze to death. Their lord also warned them that if anyone froze to death in the snow, she wouldn't be responsible. They could either lie down and freeze to death or grit their teeth and get up. No one wanted to die. Even ants wanted to live, let alone these young girls from poor families. Faced with the crisis of survival during training, everyone was full of energy and would occasionally help each other. If you help me this time, I'll help you next time. I promise to survive every dark day. With the increase in training, their appetite would definitely increase. Their appetite was like that of a kitten. Now, it was as if they were fighting to be reincarnated. Jiang Pingji's attitude toward the female soldiers was quite strict. It could even be considered harsh. The male soldiers felt chills down their spines when they saw it. Others couldn't bear to hurt them, but Jiang Pingji wouldn't go easy on them. Once she gave these young girls the illusion that they would get preferential treatment if they acted coquettishly and pitifully, they wouldn't really work hard. Instead, they would be fearless. Regardless of whether it was women or men, they all had a natural laziness in their bones. Jiang Pingji couldn't let this laziness sprout. Instead, she had to kill it in the cradle. Therefore, Jiang Pingji didn't show any mercy from beginning to end. Her heart was as hard as iron. She didn't even show a trace of gentleness. Unlike the male camp, apart from basic physical training and weapons training, there was no military drill in the female camp. Instead, there was a course on first aid skills. She recruited one of the doctors she hired to be the temporary lecturer. Not only did he have to impart the first aid knowledge and skills that Jiang Pingji had created, but he also had to teach them basic medical skills. At first, the doctor thought it was a fantasy. However, when there was a high reward, there would always be brave men. The doctor gave in. It was like this every day for more than 2 months. I believe it now. She's preparing to use women as men. It had been more than 2 months since Jiang Pingji taught the new recruits a lesson. The female soldiers in the female camp had undergone earth-shaking changes. His slender figure and timid expression were gone, replaced by a well-proportioned figure and a serious expression. Girls nowadays were about 1.5 to 1.6 meters tall. Very few were taller than that. Jiang Pingji was an exception. Due to the large amount of training and sufficient nutrition, these little girls had the tendency to continue to grow. After nightfall, the female soldiers had some free time. 10 people to a tent, and the beds were all next to each other. Hearing the girl in the same tent grumble, the other female soldiers couldn't help but complain. Even men aren't that pitiful, right? I have a brother who is also in the men's barracks. I heard he has it much easier than us. The 10 girls were silent for a while, and the atmosphere was eerily quiet. After a while, I heard that the district headquarters recruited women to serve the men. It scared me to death. They were all unmarried girls. They didn't understand the relationship between men and women, but they knew what a prostitute was. How could a girl from a pure family be willing to lower herself to become a lowly prostitute? A female soldier who was lying in a warm blanket said softly, I don't know if I should be happy or cry. They should be happy that they didn't have to be prostitutes, but they had been crying all this time. Every day, they almost crawled back to their tents. A few of them hid in their blankets and cried bitterly. The female soldier from before turned over and lied on her stomach. I heard my brother say, our salaries will be coming tomorrow. We have salaries? Everyone was stunned. Why didn't they know about it? Yes, my brother accidentally heard it. He said that everyone gets 100 copper coins and 2 buckets of rice a month. This was not a high standard, but considering that the female soldiers used the barracks for food, drink, and clothing, it wasn't low. Is this news accurate? The others quickly asked. It should be accurate. After all, we are soldiers too. According to the Lord, we have to go to the battlefield to kill enemies in the future. Otherwise, why do we learn these things? Speaking of this, the female soldier added with a smile, I heard that in the barracks next door, everyone receives the same salary as us. At this moment, a 15 or 16-year-old girl shrunk her neck and said in a low voice, I'm afraid of death. Another said, look at what you're saying. Who isn't afraid of death? When I was sent here by my stepmother, I wanted to just die like that. But now, I can go to the battlefield and kill enemies. If I accidentally make military contributions in the future, I might even be able to become a female general. Just like those novels in the past, how awe-inspiring. Is this okay? Their salaries are the same as those men. Why is it different if they make military contributions? The group of young girls thought silently. It didn't seem impossible. At this moment, a girl lying in the innermost part of the tent spoke. I'd rather die on the battlefield than go home. If I go home, I might be sold to some ugly man as a wife. I'll be beaten every day and live worse than the pigs at home. It's better to beat people, it hurts too much. Speaking of beating people, these young girls had something to talk about. My sister was beaten to death by her mother-in-law. After marrying into their family, she didn't have a day of rest. She would be slapped every time she ate a few more mouthfuls of food. If she was late to work in the fields, she would be beaten even harder. Later, when she was 9 months pregnant, her mother-in-law still beat her. She sprained her ankle and fell to the ground. That old B*Tisich said she was pretending. In the end, the child and sister died. That old B*Tis was fine. If I get married in the future, whoever dares to beat me will be beaten to the ground. Hee, can you beat them? Those old men are really strong. Learn well now. If you can't beat them, do you want to be beaten? What if you're beaten to death? Come on, they don't have much strength. We don't have enough to eat all day. Why would we be afraid of a weakling? Chatting before bed was almost the only fun for the female soldiers. The training during the day was heavy, and there were people patrolling at night, so they fell asleep very quickly. The next day, there were indeed people carrying food and copper coins. This news made the female soldiers excited. Each of them received 200 coins and 4 buckets of rice. That was 2 months' worth of salary. Before they could get over their excitement, Jiang Pingji, who had traumatized everyone, appeared. Many of them subconsciously shivered. Have all of you received your salary? She asked. More than 2 months was enough for the female soldiers to know Jiang Pingji's character. When answering questions, they must shout and answer loudly. Chapter 486. Jiang Pingji glanced at the crowd. Copper coins are easy to deal with. You can put them anywhere. But you live in the barracks and you don't have to pay for the food, so what do you plan to do with the food you receive? Do you send it home to your parents and brothers? Or do you exchange it for copper coins and keep it for yourself? The crowd didn't understand what she meant, but the audience in the streaming room understood instantly. Lao Cg Lianmeng, streamer, you're so bad. Jin Tian Siging, haha, the streamer is up to something bad. She's alienating these female soldiers from their families. This batch of female soldiers were almost unwilling. They were seen as burdens and abandoned by their families and were forced to join them. At that time, these families thought that the girls were there to be prostitutes in the camp, but they still gave them away. It was clear what kind of people they were. Such coldness made even Jiang Pingji feel a little bitterly disappointed. Therefore, she wanted to know whether the fruits of the girls' hard training would be kept for themselves or given away selflessly. It turned out that Jiang Pingji's subtle influence during this period was effective. Some stubborn female soldiers hoped to exchange the food for copper coins and keep it for themselves, but there were still more than 200 girls who chose to give their salaries to their families to help them. Jiang Pingji's eyes showed some interest. Those who chose to keep it for themselves, you did well. It's not unfilial. You just made the most correct decision. Jiang Pingji said leisurely, as for those who chose to help their families, you are very kind. I don't know how much merit your families have done in their previous lives to have such good daughters in this life. It's a pity that they didn't cherish you. You'll walk your own path in the future. Let's start today's training. The female soldiers were still anxious, but when they heard Jiang Pingji's words, they had mixed feelings. When she said the training would start, they tensed up one by one. The morning and the first 2 hours of the afternoon were physical training to learn how to defeat the enemy. The rest of the time was to learn first aid from the doctor. From that month onward, there would be an assessment every 10 days. Those who failed would have a part of their salaries deducted, while those who performed well would be rewarded. Under such encouragement, no one dared to take it lightly. The wooden spear in the female soldier's hand fell, and a numb feeling came from her wrist. Jiang Pingji said calmly, "Pick it up and continue." She let each female soldier fight with her once, and each of them had their wooden spear knocked away as soon as they came up. Jiang Pingji pointed out the points that they should pay attention to. She spoke in detail, and the girls listened attentively. Only after all of them had been taught a lesson would they know where they had gone wrong and be more careful next time. Jiang Pengji believed in one rule. Before learning to hit someone, one must first learn to be hit. Compared to the training of the wooden spear, Jiang Pengji taught them more about close combat. She taught them how to counterattack when they were at a disadvantage in all aspects. The female soldiers felt a little shy at first. It was too cruel and dirty. But after they got used to it, they felt that it was quite exciting. Nowadays, women's bodies were generally weaker than men's. This disadvantage couldn't be changed in a short time, so it was better to choose to play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses. Since his strength was inferior to his enemies, he would increase his speed and agility. When killing enemies on the battlefield, the only thing that mattered was whether the enemy died or not how the enemy died. The scale of the women's battalion was small. Jiang Pingji would not let them be the vanguard. She would definitely start with logistics and cleaning up the battlefield. She would first see some blood and train up their courage. Once their physical qualities were generally strengthened, she would have the next step in her plan. At the end of the day, there were two reasons why women had such a low status in society. Firstly, it was because of their bodies. Secondly, it was because their labor productivity was lower than that of men. The strength of the former could directly affect the benefits of the latter. In Jiang Pingji's world, there was a series of training methods for women's physical fitness. It could also be called the art of physical training. She slowly prepared for it for a few years. She eliminated some of the segments that could not be achieved with current technology and added other training programs. Then, she integrated them into a book and prepared to use it specifically for the women's battalion. All female soldiers in the women's battalion had to follow the training. If she really sat on the throne, she would promote it to the whole country. In this era, the difference in physical qualities between men and women was not as great as imagined. As long as they trained properly and had sufficient food and nutrition, the gap between them was very small. Jiang Pingji was still working hard to improve farming techniques to reduce physical exertion as much as possible. In this way, the difference in labor productivity would be further reduced. The only thing that was troublesome was that women had their menstrual periods every month. The gestation period was as long as 10 months. In addition to postpartum recovery, a year passed in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, men did not have such worries. Regarding this, Jiang Pingji was really at her wit's end. After all, in this era, reproduction could only rely on the most backward method of artificial reproduction. If women gave birth less, the population would not increase. Therefore, those who tormented the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and prevented widows from remarrying were idiots. The emperor of Zhongzhou was even more retarded. This world was not like her previous world. Both parents only had to go to a specialized institution for surgery and pick up the child at the specified time. According to the federal law, which woman or person dared to let a woman give birth naturally was against the law. Even so, most federal citizens still did not like to have children because it was too troublesome. Seeing the population decline and the war population consumption was high, to alleviate the population pressure, the federal government had no choice but to pass a bill and start the population growth plan. When both men and women came of age, there would be compulsory donations. The government would screen for good genes and breed high-quality babies. The specific information of both parents would be written on the child's ID card to prevent blood relations from going haywire. After the baby was born, the federal government would be responsible for all the upbringing. According to the technology of this era, they could only be a dream. There was no way to avoid the menstrual period because the genes of women were still in a relatively inferior stage. This problem could not be eradicated, but she could think of ways to delay the gestation period. For example, female soldiers were allowed to retire in their 20s. Before retirement, they were not allowed to have any childbirth activities. After retirement, they would be given all kinds of preferential treatment. Some female soldiers could even stay in the military camp and continue to be instructors to train the next generation. They did not have to go to the battlefield, they only had to take care of logistics. Under such circumstances, the female soldiers could find someone to marry and have children with peace of mind. Jiang Pingji was also a little worried about the age limit. It was too late. In the eyes of the world, people of the same age as them were already old enough to be grandmothers. The female soldiers were a group of old women. It was too early, and their military service time was too short. It was a waste of resources. Jiang Pingji did not want to let them go. She told this problem to a group of subordinates, wanting to seek their opinions. Set it at 24 years old? Wei Ci thought about it and said, "This age should be more suitable." Qiguan Rang seconded. "My lord, you really don't have to be so careful. The military registration has always been different from other things. You can make the decision." In this era, soldiers had a specific military registration. Female soldiers were treated equally, so naturally, there was one. However, to let the female soldiers marry after 24 years old was not like the palace maids. Once they entered the palace, they could never come out again. Li Yun, this honest child, had a problem. Isn't it too late to get married at 24 years old? Can you find a man who is still unmarried? Jiang Pingji glanced sideways and said disdainfully, "You can choose the male soldiers you captured after defeating the enemy." Chapter 487. Picket will? These three words echoed in everyone's mind. Wei Ci relied on his superhuman willpower to hold back his laughter. His Majesty was still so overbearing and willful. As for the others, well, they were shocked at first, but they quickly accepted this setting. Normally, the captives were sent by the demons to do hard labor and labor. No one cared about them. Now that they were given a chance to form a family, the captives might fight for it. However, in order not to give the captives a sense of superiority or even treat the female soldiers harshly, they felt that this matter had to be considered at length. Jiang Pengji was stunned and asked, "Why do you say so?" Feng Jin said, "A captive is a captive. They belong to the slave register and are of the lower class. My lord's action may be misinterpreted." If someone else publicized that Jiang Pingji had captured slaves and assigned them female soldiers as wives, would this be acceptable? Jiang Pingji was stunned. This seemed to make sense. However, if the female soldiers retired in their 20s, the men of the same age were either married twice, or even thrice. Who knew how many children they had? Wouldn't it be even more unfair to let the female soldiers that she had meticulously trained marry someone else and become a stepmother? She wanted to hear what they had to say. Qiguan Rang understood what he meant and explained to Jiang Pingji with a faint smile. If the captives are used to reward the female soldiers, form a family, and settle the marriage issue, then the household register should be headed by the female soldiers so that the children born in the future won't follow their father into the slave register. If we don't do this, my lord's painstaking efforts will be in vain. Feng Jin said, "Wenjing's words are what I mean." Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. Her subordinate suggested to let the female soldiers be the head of the household register. What did this mean? It meant that the children born in the future must follow the female soldiers, including their surnames. She never thought that her subordinate would be so open-minded. She didn't even have the confidence to propose this. The viewers in the streaming room were so surprised that they threw away the melon in their hands and typed furiously to express their shock. Jin Tian jigging. "Damn, streamer, go and confirm if Qiguan Rang has been transmigrated. He has such advanced thinking?" Even here, if the children want to follow their mother's surname, they either discuss it with the husband and have a second child to follow their mother's surname, or the husband marries into the family and becomes a live-in son-in-law. Tudu Feichio, I feel like I'm watching a fake live stream. How could ancient men be so open-minded? Simiran Zaiwo Xia. There must be something wrong with my ears. How could Uncle Qiguan Rang say something like that? Lao Cg Lianming, #despise. What's there to be surprised about? On the contrary, I think their thinking is very normal. They haven't broken away from the constraints of this era. First of all, they didn't see the captives as people. The captives were used to reward the female soldiers. Do you know what a reward is? They were just objects. Under such circumstances, the children born by the female soldiers followed the man's household registration. This behavior was very humiliating. In the end, were they using female soldiers to reward the captives, or were they using the captives to reward the female soldiers? The meaning of the two was completely different. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with suggesting that female soldiers should be the head of household registration. Gui kai guo feng xiao. Although I understand what you mean, I'm still shocked. Xingxing Big Boss Calais. Thank you for your explanation. But I have a question. What if the captive has an affair? Defeated by you, tisk, cheating? Wasn't there a crime of adultery in ancient times? The streamer also emphasized severe punishment. You should worry about whether the captive's husband will cheat and whether the female soldiers will beat him to death. You shouldn't worry about whether the wife will seek death if the husband cheats. According to their conclusion after watching the live stream for a long time, in this era, killing a prostitute was not considered murder. On the contrary, once the prostitute was discovered, both men and women would have to bear great punishment, especially when the streamer deliberately increased the punishment. They believed that the female soldiers taught by the streamer were definitely not weak girls. Ahem, that's a good idea. Think about it again and come up with a regulation. Inform the female battalion in 2 days. Jiang Pingji was best at making a start and then throwing the matter to her subordinates. Feng Jin and the others secretly sighed. Sure enough, it was like that again. 3 days later, everyone in the female battalion received a draft notice. Among them were 1 or 2 girls who used to be rich. However, they were too young and could not keep their family property after their families broke up. Instead, they were sent to the brothel by their relatives. Of course, now that she knew it was not a brothel but a proper soldier, she was relieved. In addition, she knew how to read, so she was quickly promoted. In her free time, she taught the female soldiers how to read. She read the contents of the notice word by word. Everyone's mood was like sitting on a roller coaster, going up and down. Hearing that they had to be 24 years old before they could get married and that they were not allowed to get married before that, everyone's faces turned pale. At the age of 24, people of the same age could prepare to be grandmothers, but they were still old ladies who could not get married. Many of them were worried about the rest of their lives and felt very sad. However, not long after, there was a turn of events. This is true. Can we really choose a husband? Corporal, look again. Is there a mistake? How can it be so absurd? Although they said it was absurd, their pair of black grape-like eyes were sparkling. They were eager to try it out. The corporal who could read nodded and said, "There's no mistake. What's written on it is true." They did not have to worry about not being able to get married at the age of 24 or marrying an old man to be a stepmother. They could choose a husband from among the captives and bring him home to have a child. The child would have to take their surname. If that was the case, what would they have to worry about in the future? They were soldiers and received a monthly salary. If they saved it until they were 24 years old, it would be a considerable sum of money. They could buy a few acres of land and live comfortably as a wife. It would be wonderful. If they made great contributions in the past few years as soldiers, they might be promoted and live comfortably without farming. These were secondary. What touched them the most was that as the owner of the household register, the child would take their surname. One of the female soldiers said silently and secretly blushed. If that's the case, that's great. The contents of the notice were indeed a little shocking. But thinking about it carefully, it was all for their future. It seemed that there was nothing good about marrying early and having children. As a female soldier, there was still a long way to go. Fortunately, Xiangyang district was located in the north. These young ladies did not know about the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. With regards to this rebellious notice, other than a little fear, they were all eager to try it out. They could not wait to go to war now. If they made military contributions, their future would be miserable. Chapter 488. The effect of the notice was huge. Looking at the group of female soldiers holding their breath to train, Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows. She silently adjusted the training and increased the intensity. Another 10 days passed. The snow and ice melted. The wasteland that had been cleared last year could be prepared for farming. Plowing fields, farming tools, cattle, and improved seeds have all been distributed. Xiangyang district gradually became lively. Everywhere was bustling with activity. Farmers could be seen working hard in the fields. Because the use of improved farming tools has been taught early on, it's easier now. Using the improved farming tools, the people were surprised to find that the farming efficiency was much higher than before. After plowing an acre of land, they didn't feel as tired as before. At a time when the war in the north was at loggerheads, such a flourishing scene made many people sigh with emotion. It was probably the only one in the whole north. Before the spring plowing, according to tradition, a spring plowing ceremony was held. The district magistrate was the host. Jiang Pengji did a lot of homework. She seriously memorized all the procedures. Originally, she only needed to put on a show and pose. The other steps would naturally be taken by someone else. However, she was stubborn and didn't like to fake it. She did it herself during the spring plowing ceremony. She carefully plowed an acre of land. Whether it was the depth of the plowing or other aspects, she was not inferior to the experienced farmers. The onlookers let out enthusiastic exclamations. Jiang Pengji won the applause of the crowd. My lord is still so serious and meticulous. Suku had already changed out of his formal Confucian robes. He wore a brown hemp garment. His trousers were rolled up to his knees. He looked like a farmer. Feng Jin was dressed neatly. He was the host of the spring plowing ceremony. He raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Why didn't I know that my lord's farming skills are so good?" Changsheng followed her mother out to watch the spring plowing ceremony. She saw her father's shadow and vaguely called out, "Father." She was dressed up like a lucky doll for the new year. Coco, father. Father. The little girl raised her little chubby finger and pointed at Feng Jin. As she shouted, saliva hung from the corner of her mouth. The clever Changsheng called him father for the first time after the New Year's banquet. After that, her speech became clearer. Wei Jingxian pursed her lips and chuckled. She carried Changsheng, who had become much heavier, and walked towards Feng Jin. When the Lord was in Hejian County, he learned it from an old farmer, Suku replied. He turned his head and said, "Huayu, your daughter is calling for you." Feng Jin smiled and said, "Jin will go take a look." Then, he thought of something and immediately returned to his normal state of looking at his nose and his heart. The Lord's fiancée came all the way here to pursue her husband? The messenger secretly shifted his gaze. He used his peripheral vision to observe Jiang Pengji and Shangguan Wan, who refused to let go of her. Not only was the messenger shocked, but many of the audience in the streaming room were also stunned. Who was the girl in the streamer's arms? Zhu Jigua Baifeng. No, are there any ancient gods here? Tell me who this girl is. Guoshu and Xiao Pudding. Hey, where did this little demon come from? Let go of my prince, where are your claws? In fact, not only was Shangguan Wan hugging Jiang Pengji's waist, but she was also burying her head in Jiang Pengji's chest. Yiwu Yanling, #Picknose. She's obviously my goddess. The person above, are you trying to snatch her from me? Tudufeichio, I shook my head. It took me a while to remember who this girl is. This is a super ancient god. Let me tell you, Shangguan Wan, a very pure and cute girl. She's the most favored noble lady of the Shangguan family. I remember that she's quite dependent on the streamer, and the streamer dotes on her. The most favored noble lady of the Shangguan family? How could she behave like this? Many of the audience were confused. They had watched the streaming room for so many years and knew that brown clothing was only worn by commoners. Shangguan Wan's clothes were brown, and the material was coarse. In their memories, didn't noble ladies wear silk and satin and dress up beautifully? Their hair was full of pearls and jade, and they were low-key and luxurious? No matter how he looked at it, Shangguan Wan looked like a refugee who had escaped from a disaster. Brother Lanting, do you not welcome me? Chapter 489. She did not know what she had done to agitate Shangguan, but she hugged her waist and cried in her arms. Jiang Pingji was startled and immediately realized that something was wrong. Shangguan was indeed lively and cheerful, but it did not mean that she did not have the upbringing of an aristocratic family. Therefore, according to Shangguan, even if she was sad, she would not care about her image like she was now. Shangguan knew her gender, but outsiders did not. She hugged a man and cried in public. Wouldn't people laugh at her for being shameless? Apart from that, she followed the troops from Hejian County to Xiangyang District. That itself was very thought-provoking. No matter how mischievous Shangguan was, she would not run away from home. Jiang Pingji's face darkened. At that moment, Jiang Nongqin came forward and bowed to her respectfully. Subordinate Jiang Nongqin greets my lord. Get up. You don't have to be so courteous. Jiang Pingji frowned and asked Jiang Nongqin, left Hejian County with you? Yes, Jiang Nongqin replied. After a while, there was a tinge of indignation on her cold expression. As a woman who was once a victim, she could not bear to see such a tragedy. My lord, Lady Wan, this is a long story. She did not run away from home on her own. She had no choice. If she did not leave Hejian County, I'm afraid that you would only be able to see her grave in the future. Jiang Pingji's heart sank. She comforted the crying Shangguan and said, This is not the place to talk. Let's enter the city first. Seeing that Shangguan could not control herself from crying, Jiang Pingji did not comfort her. She quietly waited for her to calm down. After a while, the clothes in her arms were gently pulled. She lowered her head and asked, You're not crying anymore? Shangguan raised her hand to wipe away the tears on her face. The front of Jiang Pingji's clothes was also wet from her tears. No, don't cry. Does not cry so much. Even when she was tortured by the Zhang family, she stubbornly refused to cry. Now that she met Jiang Pingji, her tears flowed like a spring. Shangguan only felt that countless eyes were on her. She could not care less about crying and blushed. Then don't hug me anymore. Do you want me to carry you into the city? Jiang Pingji smiled and raised her hand to rub the top of Shangguan's head. As soon as she rubbed it, she realized something was wrong. She frowned and a bold guess flashed through her mind. She deliberately maintained a calm expression and asked, Why did you cut your hair? Our bodies, hair, and skin are given by our parents. According to the rules, apart from a few exceptions, one's hair could only be trimmed and not cut. Shangguan's face turned pale. She bit her lower lip and said, When her husband dies, her chastity is broken. Jiang Pingji's face darkened when she heard that. Thinking of Shangguan's attitude and her appearance in Xiangyang district, she vaguely guessed something. Let's enter the city first. Her voice sank a few notches. Jiang Nongqin followed Jiang Pingji into the district headquarters, dressed in a professional attire. After a long time, Kacha, the sound of a table shattering came from the back hall. Qiguan Rang could not help but frown. After a while, his lord's suppressed anger could be heard from the back hall. Qiguan Rang was startled. Which idiot had angered his lord? Shangguan felt embarrassed when she saw Jiang Pingji's anger. She spoke softly. Sister Lanting, I'm fine. Call me brother, Jiang Pingji emphasized. Shangguan lowered her head and said, Oh, Brother Lanting, I'm really fine. After she threw the divorce papers to the Zhangs, she gave up her womanly attire and returned to being a young girl. However, it was not easy to grow back the hair that had been lost. Even if she concealed it well, Jiang Pingji found out the problem with a touch. I really don't know where your usual intelligence went. When your stepmother forced you, you should have thought of a way to sneak out of the house and take the token I gave you to the Lu residence to ask for help. Jiang Pingji was exasperated at her failure to live up to her expectations. She raised her hand and poked her forehead. If my mother hadn't stopped you by chance, were you planning to commit suicide? If this place doesn't keep me, there will be another place for me. A tree dies when moved, but a man lives when moved. Suicide was the behavior of the weak. Jiang Pingji had always scoffed at it. Sheng Wanwan's heart warmed. She lowered her head and said, "At that time, I didn't think of it." Speaking of which, she had been too confident. Sheng Wanwan had been pampered for many years. She had never seen her stepmother as an opponent. She believed that her family would definitely stand by her side and protect her from her stepmother's bullying. Moreover, she was already engaged at that time. As long as she was out of mourning, she would be able to marry into her husband's family. Out of sight, out of mind. She would not have to look at her stepmother's sneaky smile. However, she had not expected that one miscalculation would cause her to lose everything. Having a stepmother meant having a stepfather. This saying was true. Her stepmother was also powerful. She was gentle and considerate. She was willing to be lowly and humble. She was so humble that Sheng Wanwan looked down on her. She really suspected that her stepmother was from a noble family and not a brothel. However, this attitude catered to her grandmother's and father's preferences. She slowly drew away the two most important supporters of the family. Her future mother-in-law was also instigated by her and forced to break off the engagement. Sheng Wanwan, a proud daughter of the heavens, became a joke. Now that he thought about it, this stepmother was quite formidable. She was like a black widow, weaving a poisonous net and quietly waiting for the prey to fall into the net. When the prey struggled until it had no strength and was on its last breath, she would suddenly make a move, skin the prey, and swallow it into her stomach. Sheng Wanwan could not help but shiver when she thought about it. Jiang Pengji sighed softly and said, "Forget it. At least you're safe and sound now." Sheng Wanwan agreed. She held her hand with a smile and said timidly, "I don't have a place to stay. One is currently homeless. Brother Lanting, are you willing to adopt an idler?" "No," Jiang Pingji said firmly. She did not wait for Sheng Wanwan to feel sad. She said, "Good one, come and help me. What do you think?" Sheng Wanwan was stunned when she heard that. The bullet screen in the streaming room was overwhelming, denouncing Jiang Pingji. "To me Dalao, what the F***ck? Can you be more shameless? Can you be more shameless? Can you be more shameless? Xing Dalao, hello, everyone. I'm the host's face. She doesn't want me anymore. I feel so bad. Fengzi Dalao, Shangwan, little lowly, you've just escaped the tiger's den and stepped into the wolf's den." The audience in the streaming room felt sorry for Shangwan Wan, but due to the distance, they could only watch as the little rabbit jumped into Jiang Pingji's trap. They could imagine that when the little girl jumped into the trap, Jiang Pingji would happily bury her. She was sold by the host, and she was counting the money for the host. Shangwan Wan blinked. She did not understand what Jiang Pingji meant. "How can I help Brother Lanting?" Jiang Pingji ignored the bullet screen. "I plan to build a school and take in children of suitable age. I don't expect them to be knowledgeable, but they need to be literate and able to do arithmetic. Wanda, you can be a teacher and help teach them for a while. What do you think?" Top talents were hard to come by, but basic talents could be cultivated by oneself. They could be put to use after 2 or 3 years. Chapter 490. Shangwan Wan blushed and said softly, "How can I be a teacher with my limited knowledge?" Jiang Pingji said, "My Wan is extremely intelligent. I'm sure you'll be able to teach her simple knowledge." But she glanced at Jiang Nongqin, who was sitting at the side, and said softly, "I prefer to be like you." Along the way to the north, Shangwan Wan had seen too many things that she had never come into contact with before. The more it was like this, the more she wanted to protect herself. Jiang Pengji could understand her thoughts and did not force her. "It's not wrong for you to do so, but your martial arts skills are not up to par. If you go to the battlefield, it'll be extremely dangerous. How about this? You teach at the school for a period of time, and I'll arrange a martial arts master for you. When you've graduated from him, you'll be allowed to go to the battlefield." Shangwan Wan thought about it and agreed with a smile. Jiang Pengji secretly frowned and thought to herself, "I'll ask Liyun to be stricter when the time comes. If her martial arts skills did not reach a certain level, she would not be released. What was the battlefield? She would lose her life if she was not careful. Shangguan still needed time to grow. After catching up, Shangguan could not help but think of the streets and houses she saw along the way. She thought about it and sighed. I followed the troops all the way from Hejian to Xiangyang, so I know how chaotic the situation in the north is. Under such circumstances, the people under your rule can still live and work in peace and contentment, and the spring plowing scene is extraordinarily lively. Sigh, the people of Xiangyang are blessed to have such a good official like Brother Lanting. Jiang Pingji did not know whether to laugh or cry. You're flattering me. My bones are going to turn soft from your flattery. She instructed the small kitchen of the district headquarters to prepare a meal for Shangguan and Jiang Nongqin. The two of them did not eat anything good along the way. Usually, they barely managed to make do with a meal of cold and hard rations mixed with boiled snow water. Now that they smelled the tempting aroma of the delicacies, they did not care about their image and ate to their heart's content. Jiang Pingji went to the government office and asked someone to call Li Yun over. I've taken you in as a disciple, she said. Li Yun was stunned and quickly shook his head. I'm not good at martial arts, how can I be a teacher? Jiang Pingji said, I'm not asking you to take up the post now. We'll talk about it after we've conquered Fengyi County. Now, you just have to prepare for the battle with peace of mind. Once the preparations are complete, we can go to war. As for Wana, she is a good student who is eager to learn. You can just go to the school occasionally to give her some pointers. I forgot to tell you that I gave Wana the task of being the teacher of the academy. School? Li Yun couldn't react in time. Qiguan Rang was stunned as well. Since when did Xiangyang district torment the school? Jiang Pingji crossed her arms in front of her chest and added, the academy was a last-minute decision I made. I didn't have time to discuss it with you. To be precise, she had only decided to start building a school when Shangguan appeared. Qiguan Rang and Li Yun were speechless. It was tiring to be a subordinate with such a master who could do whatever she wanted. Qiguan Rang knew that Jiang Pingji often stirred up trouble, but he also knew that she was not a careless person. Every move she made was carefully considered. He asked in surprise, why does my lord want to build a school? Jiang Pingji turned her head and asked, don't you think we have too few people we can use? Li Yun scratched his head and asked honestly, but can't we recruit people? It's not easy to build a school, right? Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. Other matters could be delayed, but the school was related to the long-term development of the future. How can the people we recruit be as loyal and reliable as the people we nurture? I, your lord, am alone and powerless now. I may not even be interested in the truly virtuous talents. Jiang Pingji laughed and said, do you know how Xiangyang district was built to its current state? Ask Wen Zheng and the rest and you'll know how tired it was before the new year. If we can nurture a batch of useful people, we can save a lot of effort. Talents, no matter when it was, could never be too much. Jiang Pingji said again, they don't have to learn well, nor do we need them to be knowledgeable. It's fine as long as they can read and do accounting. When there were enough basic talents, she planned to start nurturing elite talents. The former was time-consuming and had quick results. The latter took a long time, but it was beneficial for future development. She understood that the prosperity of a country could not do without a large number of basic talents. What's more, there was a lack of elite talents to be the brains. It was just that it was too early to think about this. She planned to take it one step at a time. Qiguan Rang immediately figured out the crux of the matter. Indeed, they did not lack top-notch talents now. They only lacked useful basic talents. Only when the foundation was solid could they build a higher building. But, if they were to build a school, there would definitely be more than one room. The scale should be larger than ordinary private schools. How much would they need to invest? Suddenly, Qiguan Rang felt sorry for the poor Suku. If his lord really built a school, Suku had to make a budget. Li Yun asked, then, my lord, when will the school be built? Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, after we conquer Fengyi County. Some spies went there to investigate the situation. The Tsing-Yi army really do not know how to manage. They are as stupid as pigs. Not to mention that half of the population of such a large county has been lost. It is so desolate and barren that it can't even compare to a small county. To restore it to its former state, it will take at least half a year, at most a year. When Fringy County is stabilized, we will be considered to have a firm foothold. Her current official position was only that of a district magistrate. Logically speaking, she needed the permission of the Dongqing royal family. But it did not matter. Whoever had the bigger fist had the right to speak. The district magistrate of Fringy County could curry favor with the Tsing-Yi army. Naturally, he would listen to her obediently. When Feng Jin and the rest returned, Jiang Pingji specially held a barbecue party. When everyone realized that there were 2 more women at the table, they could not help but be stunned. What the hell was this? Feng Jin looked at one of them and felt that she was vaguely familiar. It was as if he had seen her somewhere before. This is Jiang Nongqin. From now on, she will be in charge of everything in the women's camp, Jiang Pingji said. Luo Yue and Li Yun were stunned. Then, their gazes fell on Jiang Nongqin at the same time. They thought to themselves, is this maiden Jiang? Including the female troops that Jiang Nongqin brought, the number of women's camp had already exceeded 1,200 people. With the addition of some people, they could barely be considered as a battalion and could be treated as an independent combat unit. According to the current rules, the commander of such a scale could be called a general or a captain. Their lord actually appointed a woman as a general. On the other hand, Meng Hun congratulated Jiang Nongqin. She replied with a smile, "From now on, please give me more pointers, coach." Meng Hun smiled and said, "I don't dare to give you pointers. Maiden, you can also take charge on your own now." Jiang Nongqin was quiet by nature. She did things in a low-key manner. Her style was down to earth. Meng Hun was very satisfied with working with her in the past. He had a very good impression of her. Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on Shangguan Wan. She said, "This is Shangguan Wan. Before the school is built, she will be in charge of the women's department in the government office." The women's department in the government office referred to the more than 20 maidens who were subordinates in the government office. The matters they dealt with were not considered major, but the details were very complicated. They helped Su Ku and the rest to share a lot of labor. Shangguan Wan. Chapter 491. Sensing that someone was looking at her, Shangguan Wan looked over and realized that it was a handsome young Lang Jun. Li Yun secretly nodded his head, expressing his satisfaction. Such vigilance was not bad. Shangguan Wan was secretly puzzled. Shangguan Wan and Jiang Nongqin had already eaten a little. Initially, they thought that they should not eat too much, but when the roast meat was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside was dipped in various spices, the aroma of the food tempted their taste buds. Their mouths kept salivating. Actually, they were not that full. Thinking of this, they did not care about being reserved anymore. They roasted and ate when they wanted to. Brother Land. No, I'm calling you Lord now. These days are so comfortable. Shangguan Wan's diet had always been a combination of meat and vegetables. She rarely only ate meat like she did now. She thought that she would get sick of the taste after eating a few more mouthfuls, but after eating 2 plates of sliced meat with those strange sauces, she could have eaten more if her stomach was not big enough. Eat your roast meat. So much can't stop your mouth. Jiang Pingji carefully flipped the meat slices on the roast plate. She raised her eyebrows slightly, and her cold voice carried some affection. Shangguan Wan sighed and said, "It's not worth it to grow up." Jiang Pingji glanced at her from the corner of her eyes and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Shangguan Wan said, "If I was still the same age, my lord would not have complained that I ate too much. I'm afraid you would have coaxed me to eat more." Jiang Pingji sighed and used clean chopsticks to add half a plate of meat. She said helplessly, "My kindness was treated as ill intent. It's not good to eat too much meat, lest it accumulates in the stomach and becomes difficult to digest. You, on the other hand, misunderstood that my heart ached for the roast meat. You're really heartless. Here, I've roasted it for you." Looking at the interaction between Shangguan Wan and Jiang Pingji, Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows slightly and exchanged glances with Su Ku. They looked like they were watching a good show. "Lovers. It's good to be young, Qiguan Rang lowered his voice and teased. Su Ku responded with an expression that said, "We both know." Logically speaking, his lord was already 16 years old this year. However, other than his first fiancée, the current Madame Feng Jin, Wei Jingxian, he had never heard of his lord having any other female confidants. Their lord was still young, so they were not very anxious. Moreover, their lord was so protective of the fairer sex. Why would he worry about not being popular with women? On this matter, the two of them had the same idea. A man should first establish his career, and there was no hurry to get married. Speaking of marriage, Su Ku and Qiguan Rang were secretly worried about the relationship between Feng Jin and their lord. Feng Jin was the current husband of the lord's ex-fiancée. Was it really okay for the two of them to be together? The facts proved that Feng Jin was truly a benevolent gentleman. He was open-minded and did not care about those rumors. Even at last year's New Year's banquet, he was generous enough to bring his wife and children along. Now that Shangguan Wan, who had a close relationship with their lord, had appeared, they felt that something good might be around the corner. In fact, when Qiguan Rang was sighing with emotion, Wei Si's hand that was holding the cup trembled and the wine spilled out. Feng Jin looked even more conflicted. It was really difficult. He guarded a secret that only a few people knew about and watched as his teammates let their imaginations run wild, but he could not explain it. Let them speculate. It won't come true anyway. Wei Si took out a greenish-gray handkerchief and calmly wiped the wine on his hand. If his lord was attentive to a man, he could gossip, but he was not worried about Shangguan Wan. When Feng Jin heard Wei Si's words, his lips curled into a smile. I think so too. The two of them looked at each other with tacit understanding and raised their cups to drink. Wei Si's body was still weak, so the wine he drank was nourishing medicinal wine. After being unanimously approved by several physicians, it could slowly drive away the cold. Jingxian is also in Xiangyang. Changxing, who was born last year, can talk and walk now. Do you want to go and take a look? Shangguan Wan's eyes lit up when she heard that. Of course I have to go. I haven't seen Sister Jingxian for a long time. When they saw Wei Jingxian, the two of them naturally sighed and talked to each other about their encounters over the years. When she learned that Shangguan Wan finally got rid of Madame Zhang, Wei Jingxian could not help but feel happy for her. In the previous letter, Shangguan Wan told Wei Jingxian that she was going to marry a dead man. The man's betrothal gift also came with a copy of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Her future mother-in-law even humiliated her in public, asking Shangguan Wan to study the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and curb her dirty habits before marriage. At that time, Wei Jingxian felt extremely angry. She was the legitimate daughter of the Shangguan family and was born into a noble aristocratic family. How could she tolerate being humiliated and belittled by such a shrew? However, every family had their own difficulties. At that time, Wei Jingxian was still with Feng Jin as a hostage in Shangjing and could not even protect herself. The only thing she could do was to comfort Shangguan Wan. She could not really help her. Wei Jingxian hugged Changxing. It's all right now. I don't have to worry anymore. Shangguan Wan sighed. Yes, she used to be Shangguan Wan of the Shangguan family. Now, Shangguan Wan is just Shangguan Wan. Aunt. Recently, Changsheng liked to remember people. Whenever she caught one, she would repeat it over and over again. Shangguan Wan looked at Changsheng and could not help but have a bold idea. Is Sister Jingxian taking care of little Changsheng at home now? Wei Jingxian was stunned. Yes, Changxing is still young and doesn't like to stick to wet nurses or maids. Changxing was young and had a bad temper. The servants really could not control her, so she could only raise her by her side. Sister Jingxian, have you ever thought of finding a job? Wei Jingxian was stumped by the question. She looked at Shangguan Wan in confusion. Why are you suddenly asking this? Shangguan Wan could not tell why. She just felt that Wei Jingxian was also familiar with the classics and historical collections in her boudoir and knew the morals of saints. In terms of talent, she was not as talented as someone like Feng Jin, but she was much better than those illiterate fools. It was just that it was too much of a waste to be trapped in a small inner courtyard. Because of her own experience, Shangguan Wan always lacked a sense of security. In the past, she felt that it was enough for a noble lady of an aristocratic family to fulfill her responsibilities. Now, she felt that such a life was a little dangerous. She deliberated for a while and told her the truth. Wei Jingxian did not show an angry expression. Instead, she seemed to be thinking about it. Wei Jingxian sighed. Everyone has their own way of living. Changxing is still young. I can't stop worrying about her. At night, before the couple went to bed, Wei Jingxian told Feng Jin about this. Feng Jin was about to take off his clothes, but he stopped halfway and said, "When Changxing is a little older, you can give it a try." Wei Jingxian was surprised. It was as if she did not know her husband. Chapter 492. A world far vaster than the inner court? Wei Jingxian only felt as if a piece of gravel had fallen into the lake of her heart with a plop, causing ripples that slowly spread. Her nose suddenly felt a little sour, but she teased him with a smile. "Aren't you afraid that I'll be too busy with work and neglect you and Changxing?" Feng Jin smiled faintly. "If that's the case, won't you have more time to pay attention to me and Changxing?" Wei Jingxian blushed and spat softly. She said angrily, "We've been married for a few years. How are you old?" Feng Jin laughed involuntarily. "We've only been married for a few years. How am I old?" The couple was deeply affectionate and went to bed peacefully. The next day, Feng Jin went to the government office to report for work in high spirits. Jiang Pingji had a bun in her mouth. When she saw Feng Jin come over, she smiled and teased him. "Tisk tisk, it's rare for Huayu to oversleep." Feng Jin did not want to be outdone. He replied, "It's rare for my lord to be so diligent." Jiang Pingji rolled her eyes and said shamelessly, "You're wrong. Your lord has always been so diligent." If not for his upbringing, he really wanted to roll his eyes at her. Doesn't this person's conscience hurt when she says this shamelessly? His lord had always been a hands-off boss. Except for some documents that she had to approve, everything else was thrown to her subordinates. She was extremely capricious. If one wanted to meet her in the government office, one would either be extremely lucky that day or she would be bored. Jiang Pingji yawned and continued to be in a deadlock with the piles of documents. "Why is my lord so diligent today?" After Feng Jin sat down, he asked Wei Ci. Although Wei Ci did not seem to be in good health, he was always the first to arrive every day. His work efficiency was also admirable. "She has never liked to read these literary things." Wei Ci laughed involuntarily. "I'm afraid my lord has had enough of such peaceful days. She can't wait to send troops to Fengyi County." He did not dare to say that he knew this woman very well, but he still understood some of her temperament. Although comfort was something people yearned for, it would lead to laziness after a long time, and this woman hated laziness the most. He said helplessly, "But the troops brought by Maiden Jiang and the original soldiers need time to get used to each other." The 2,000 troops that Jiang Nongqin brought were not rookies. They were definitely one of the main forces to attack Fengyi. He was worried that his side would be at a disadvantage if he rashly dragged them to the battlefield before they had gotten used to each other. Wei Ci said with a natural expression, "So, isn't my lord looking for something to do because she's bored?" On one side, Jiang Pingji was sharpening her sword to attack the Tsing-Yi army in Fengyi County. On the other side of the battlefield, there was already a stalemate. In the south, Prince Changshuo's expression became increasingly ugly. In spring, he raised his troops to besiege Qinzhou in the name of purging the emperor's evil followers. He thought that he would be unstoppable, but the result was unexpected. Qinzhou, which he had expected to be easily taken down, was actually a hard bone to chew. He thought he could easily take over Qinzhou and force the emperor to abdicate. He didn't expect that not only would Qinzhou's troops be blocked at the border of Qinzhou, but a few battlefields would also put him under great pressure. After 3 days, they had lost a total of 5,000 soldiers. That Colonel Huang must have received guidance from an expert. He's quite skilled in the art of war. If we want to take him down, I'm afraid we'll have to increase the number of troops. The strategist in the tent carefully read the information sent by the spy. His brows relaxed slightly, but then he frowned a little, as if he was very troubled. They didn't know which expert was guiding them, but they were always one step ahead of them in guessing their intentions. They rarely fought head-on and mainly used sneak attacks and harassment. They worked hard to play to their strengths and avoid their weaknesses, which seriously hindered the pace of Prince Changshuo's attack. Prince Changshuo brought hundreds of thousands of troops to besiege Qinzhou. Every day, he had to spend a huge amount of rations. After a winter, he thought that Qinzhou had run out of ammunition and rations. He thought that they could take over Qinzhou with minimal losses and become the ruler of Dongqing. He would be crowned the emperor, but reality gave Prince Changshuo a hard slap in the face. Not only was Qinzhou not weak, but it was even on par with them. He wanted to take over Qinzhou in one go after spring, but he didn't expect to stumble. What Colonel Huang? He's just the son of a eunuch. Prince Changshuo curled his lips in disdain. Colonel Huang Song, was Secretary Huang's godson. Huang Song was originally the patrol of Shangjing. During the earthquake in Shangjing last year, he immediately led the patrol troops to rescue many important ministers and their relatives. Even if these people despised Huang Song's background, they couldn't help but praise him for saving their lives. With this help, Huang Song's official career became bright. Later, he even became the colonel of the Imperial Guards who was in charge of 5,000 troops. When Prince Changshuo attacked Qinzhou, Huang Song volunteered to fight. The emperor was very happy and had a higher opinion of him. Therefore, the battlefield on the left side of Qinzhou was led by Huang Song. It was also the most difficult part to deal with so far. Although Prince Changshuo's troops were much more than Huang Song's, after a few battles, Prince Changshuo's side lost more than 5,000 troops. Even if Prince Changshuo had some results in the middle and right sides, compared to the losses on the left side, he was still at a disadvantage. The strategist sighed and said, "A hero doesn't care about his background. Even if you don't like to hear it, this Huang Song is indeed worthy of your attention." Prince Changshuo's face darkened. A look of disgust flashed across his face. "Do you have a way to get rid of this fellow?" The strategist's expression didn't change, but he already felt some disgust in his heart. Previously, Prince Changshuo had humiliated him in front of a battalion commander. Now, he was bossy without the slightest bit of respect. He secretly spat. Prince Changshuo hadn't ascended the throne yet, but he already couldn't wait to tear off the facade of a wise ruler who was respectful to the wise. That was what he thought in his heart, but he didn't dare to continue angering Prince Changshuo. If it's a head-on battle, and he has the guidance of an expert behind him, Colonel Huang won't be easy to deal with. The strategist raised his brows. He already had a vicious plan in his heart. His tone was cold and harsh. But it's not difficult to transfer him away from the battlefield. Prince Changshuo paused and said, "As long as he's transferred away, it'll be easy to deal with Huang Song after we conquer Qinzhou. Just tell me what your plan is. If it's feasible, send someone to do it now." The strategist endured the restlessness and disgust in his heart and said calmly, "There's no need to trouble others. You only need my lord to write a sincere solicitation letter and promise as many benefits as you can." Prince Changshuo didn't understand. Could a verbal promise coax Huang Song over? The strategist thought to himself that he had a pig-like lord. His brain was so slow that it couldn't work. It's not to rope Huang Song in. It's just to make the emperor fear Huang Song and even want to kill him. The strategist said concisely, in case Prince Changshuo didn't understand. The emperor is extremely suspicious. Huang Song's reputation in the army is rising day by day. If there's news that my lord wants to recruit Huang Song, even if the emperor doesn't kill Huang Song, he won't let him stay at the front line. As for Huang Song, the strategist paused and swallowed the rest of his words. This Huang Song wasn't an ordinary person. Was he blindly loyal to the emperor and unchanging, or did he run away with his men when he saw the situation wasn't good? Chapter 493. Bang. Huang Song punched the table heavily. His expression was ferocious and full of anger. He threw a roll of bamboo slips filled with words on the ground. Feng Ju was still outside the tent when he heard the heavy thud inside. The soldiers guarding the tent saluted him, then lifted the tent flap to let him pass. "Bogeo, what happened? Why are you so angry?" When Feng Ju entered the tent, he noticed that the table was cracked by Huang Song. Doubts arose in his heart and he asked Huang Song with concern, "Just now, I sent a messenger to summon Ju, saying that you have an urgent matter." Feng Ju's gentle voice brought Huang Song back to his senses. He took a deep breath and tried hard to suppress the surging violence in his heart. Huang Song pointed at the scattered roll of bamboo slips on the ground. There was a murderous look in his eyes, as if he was staring at the enemy who killed his father. "Huijia, look at the letter on the ground. Prince Xianxia is a traitor. He's so arrogant that he's out of control." When he opened his mouth, his voice was slightly hoarse because of his anger. He sounded more tired than usual. Feng Ju squatted down slightly and picked up the roll of bamboo slips. Then, he opened it with both hands and read it with a frown. His composure was much better than Huang Song's. Even though the contents made his heart skip a beat, he still maintained a calm expression. He said with certainty, "Although this move of Prince Xianxia's looks ordinary, it's indeed a vicious plan. He's trying to kill you, Bogeo." Huang Song was not a fool like Prince Xianxia. When he received the roll of bamboo slips lying in his tent, he realized that the situation was bad. Even his scalp could not help but feel numb. An unprecedented sense of crisis rushed to his head. He hurriedly called Feng Ju over to think of a solution. Feng Ju sat at the lower seat and placed the roll of bamboo slips aside, as if it was some kind of scourge. Although the handwriting on it was gentle and harmless, the content inside could be said to be a deadly poisonous snake. One bite would be the end of one's life. Prince Xianxia and the current emperor are blood brothers. These two are more suspicious than the other. Feng Ju's lips curled into a mocking smile. He had long looked down on the royal family. "Although Prince Xianxia sent this letter to recruit you, Bogeo won't believe that you're sincere even if he takes advantage of the situation to get close to you. Therefore, the original intention of this letter is most likely to drive a wedge between Bogeo and His Majesty, attempting to kill with a borrowed knife." It wasn't entirely a bad habit for those in power to be overly suspicious, but to be overly suspicious to the extent of being overly suspicious would only bring about harm. Unfortunately, the current emperor and Prince Xianxia both had this temperament. He clearly knew that this letter was a ploy by Prince Xianxia to frame him, but when this news reached the palace, Huang Song's official career would come to an end. Losing his position was a small matter, but he was afraid that his entire family would lose their lives. Ever since the earthquake in Shangjing, the emperor issued an edict to move the capital to Qinzhou. Prince Xianxia forged an edict to leave his fief with troops and horses, besieging Qinzhou for an entire winter. The emperor became more and more paranoid every day. Even the slightest movement could irritate his sensitive nerves. So far, it was unknown how many upright officials and loyal officials had been mistakenly killed by the emperor. The imperial court was even more jittery. Today in Qinzhou, the emperor used the power in his hands to kill anyone who made him feel unhappy, or displeased. How long had he been in Qinzhou? Not to say that blood had flowed like a river, but the killings had already made everyone tremble with fear, and everyone was in danger. The aristocratic families and celebrities in Qinzhou didn't dare to meddle in the affairs of the imperial court, didn't dare to talk about the people's livelihood, didn't dare to delve into the ways of governance, and didn't dare to propose to strengthen the army and enrich the people. These things were even ridiculed by the public as vulgar things. They only dared to talk about romance at elegant gatherings and poetry gatherings. Feng Ju felt helpless and heartache at such a jittery atmosphere. His dissatisfaction with the emperor had already gone through the roof. None of the three sons of the Feng family were simple. Feng Ju could see that once this chatting atmosphere spread, it would harm the country. Even if everyone knew that Prince Xianxia's actions were to frame Huang Song, according to the emperor's suspicious character, he would never trust Huang Song. If the emperor still had a trace of rationality, he would most likely strip Huang Song of his military power, transfer him away from the front line, and grant him an idle position. However, according to Feng Zhu's judgment of the emperor, he was afraid that he would not be so merciful. He would rather wrongly kill 10,000 loyal officials and generals than miss a traitor who might betray him. The royal family was merciless, and brothers fought against each other. Prince Xianxia and the emperor, the two brothers, could even fight against each other, let alone Huang Song, a descendant of a eunuch who had nothing to do with the emperor. Huang Song's face was pale, as if all the blood had drained from his face. He sat in the distance, dispirited, and his eyes flickered with a complicated look. Feng Zhu sighed and said to Huang Song, "What does Bogeo plan to do now?" If he did not do anything to protect himself, when the news of Prince Xianxia recruiting Huang Song with generous promises reached the emperor's ears, it would provoke the emperor's suspicious nerves. By then, even if Huang Song had a godfather to put in a good word for him by the emperor's side, his situation would still be precarious. Huang Song held his head dispiritedly and said rather uncomfortably, I don't know how to dispel the emperor's suspicions." Up until now, Huang Song still had expectations for Dongqing. He hoped to be a loyal official who could turn the tide and benefit the people. However, Huang Song was not a foolishly loyal person. If the emperor really wanted to kill him, he would not foolishly stand on the spot and wait for misfortune to befall him. Feng Zhu sighed and said, "It's too difficult to dispel suspicions. Even if you manage to escape today, if Bogeo loses the battle just a little, it's hard to guarantee that the emperor won't suspect that you are in cahoots with Prince Xianxia. When that time comes, you really won't be able to escape." The battlefield was ever-changing, and no one could guarantee that they would win. Prince Xianxia's plan was simple but extremely vicious. It directly broke the advantage that Huang Song had accumulated with great difficulty. After hearing Feng Zhu's words, even if Huang Song was unwilling to believe it, he felt a little guilty when he thought of the emperor's current state. He wanted to cry but had no tears. He said, "Huaijie, you have to save me." These days, it was not easy to be a loyal and patriotic person. Even if Huang Song wanted to save the country and the people, reality did not allow him to. He might even face the situation of being beheaded. Feng Zhu lowered his eyes and thought for a while. He said decisively, "The plan now is to cut off my tail to survive." "Cut off my tail to survive?" Huang Song muttered. Feng Zhu knew what Huang Song was thinking. Until now, he had not completely dispelled his expectations for Dongqing. Since that was the case, he had to give it a push. He said, "Yes, this is the only plan that can preserve our strength. Bogeo, write a letter and secretly deliver it to His Majesty. Explain the details of this matter and reprimand Prince Xianxia for his wild ambition and intention to sow discord between you and the emperor. Finally, retreat in order to advance. Resign from your position as colonel and temporarily leave the front line. Don't touch these sensitive positions for the time being." After hearing that, Huang Song thought for a while in a daze. He was still hesitant and unresigned emotions filled his heart. He hated Prince Xianxia to the core. This vicious plan was too King sinister. Chapter 494. Huang Song was not a fool. He could understand the hidden meaning in Feng Zhu's words. However, he was really unwilling to give up. Ever since he was young, he knew how lowly his identity as the descendant of a eunuch was. The people he wanted to make friends with looked down on him, while the people he looked down on wanted to cling to him. The desire to be recognized was deep in his bones. How could he be respected and recognized by everyone? The only way was to become a capable minister and a pillar of the country. At present, Huang Song was still working hard towards this goal. Borrowing the east wind of the earthquake to save people, he skyrocketed and became the young talent that the emperor valued the most. At a young age, he was already a colonel, but the cruel reality did not give him the chance to advance further. Should he choose to continue to be loyal to the emperor and love his country, or should he choose to save his and his family's lives? Feng Zhu had given him the best advice. Now it was up to Huang Song to choose. After a while, Huang Song asked Feng Zhu in a hoarse voice with only a glimmer of hope, What if I write a letter to secretly inform His Majesty, pretend to agree to Prince Changshuo's invitation, and secretly find a plan to trick Prince Changshuo? What do you think? Feng Zhu's expression was cold. It was a big blow to Huang Song. First of all, Prince Changshuo will not believe that you are sincere in defecting. Even if he believes, he will always be on guard against you. Moreover, he has many strategists under him. Maybe he will use this as a breakthrough point to tear apart the defense line in Qinzhou. By then, you won't be able to explain yourself. Feng Zhu took a breath and continued, Moreover, His Majesty is narrow-minded and suspicious. Do you think he will believe that you are pretending to defect to Prince Changshuo? If you tell him this, I'm afraid he will suspect that you have the intention to rebel. The whole family will be implicated. After he finished speaking, he looked at Huang Song calmly, waiting for him to completely wake up. Now, the north of Dongqing had fallen into a chaotic war. The people had no way to live. In the south, Prince Changshuo and the emperor were fighting as equals. In the end, no matter who won or lost, the world was already in chaos. Only a saint could turn the tide. Was Huang Song a saint? He was not. Therefore, he could only do the simplest thing, self-preservation. He thought of ways to increase his strength and fight for a place in the chaotic world. Only then could he protect the people under his rule and plot more things. The current Huang Song was still too tender and weak. He needed to be more ruthless. After a while, Huang Song's pained and struggling face calmed down. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made up his mind. Song understands, I will write a letter to inform His Majesty. Retreat in order to advance and find a place to settle down. Huaijie, it's been hard on you. Huang Song's choice was within Feng Zhu's expectations. Compared to his ambition to stabilize the country, Huang Song valued his own life more. Now that he was forced to a dead end by Prince Changshuo's evil scheme, Huang Song naturally had to think of a way to escape and seek revenge in the future. Where there is life, there is hope. Making up his mind, Huang Song wrote a secret letter and sent it to the royal palace. It reached the emperor's desk almost at the same time as another secret letter. The current emperor seemed to be suffering from schizophrenia. When facing imperial consort Huijun, he would speak gently and meticulously, but when facing others, he would fly into a rage. If he was unhappy, he might draw his sword and kill someone, causing everyone to feel threatened. The aristocrats did not dare to talk about politics. Originally, there were still some courtiers who were rather critical of imperial consort Huijun's appearance in the front hall. Now, they were afraid that without her, the danger level would soar. If imperial consort Huijun was here, even if the emperor was furious, he would just throw something and keep a straight face. He would suffer some grievances, but his life would not be in danger. If imperial consort Huijun was not here, then he would have to be careful. It was definitely the blessing of the ancestors to be able to walk out of the front hall unscathed. Today, imperial consort Huijun said that she was not feeling well and did not accompany the emperor. His personal attendant was trembling at the side as he served the emperor. After reading one of the secret letters, the emperor was furious. He swept away the booklets that were piled up like a mountain on the table with his sleeves. The nerves on his face were faintly twitching, as if he was in extreme pain. The emperor held his head, suppressing the splitting headache. At the same time, he was panting like a bull. The onlookers were frightened and did not dare to approach him. Just as the attendant was hesitating whether to secretly send someone to seek help from imperial consort Huijun, the emperor picked up another secret letter. His action of opening the secret letter was unusually rough. When he opened the secret letter and read it, his tightly furrowed brows relaxed slightly. His eyes flickered with a strange flickering light. The first secret letter was a secret agent reporting that Prince Changshuo had secretly solicited Huang Song. Huang Song and his trusted aides had discussed in detail in the tent for a long time. The second secret letter was written by Huang Song. He spoke frankly about Prince Changshuo's wild ambition. He intended to use such despicable actions to sow discord between the emperor and his officials. He sincerely expressed his loyalty, and then excused himself by saying that he was not feeling well and might not be able to share the emperor's burden at the front line. If the emperor felt that he could be of great use, it would be better to transfer him to a more remote place in the rear and continue to shine for the emperor. If not for the timely arrival of the second secret letter, the emperor was afraid that he would have ordered the secret agent and his trusted aide to secretly eliminate Huang Song. However, even if this secret letter came in time, the emperor still disliked Huang Song. He could not help but suspect whether Huang Song had accepted the generous treatment given by Prince Changshu and whether he was not loyal to him. He wanted to find a reason to remove all of Huang Song's positions. Now that Huang Song knew his place and asked to leave the front line, the emperor was not so disgusted and suspicious. After thinking about it, he picked up his brush and wrote an imperial edict. He quickly sent it to the front line to recall Huang Song. He did not want others to think that he was heartless. Now that Huang Song had taken the initiative to give him a way out, he took the opportunity to do so. After writing this imperial edict, he wrote another appointment letter appointing Huang Song as the district magistrate of Diyang district in Maota County of Haozhou. Because of his suspicions and Huang Song's young age, he did not give Huang Song a high official title. He only gave him the position of a district magistrate of a rather barren and remote small county. If Huang Song did well, he would promote him in the future. Haozhou was one of the 21 counties in Dongqing's Liuzhou. It was the poorest and weakest place among the 6 states. Among them, Maota County was considered a relatively prosperous place in Haozhou. Diyang district in Maota County was the best place among them. It was also considered the emperor's alternative compensation. All of this was within Feng Zhu's expectations. He helped Huang Song find a place to settle down by taking a step back. When the 2 imperial edicts were passed to Huang Song, Jiang Pingji was already eager to lead the troops into battle. Although Xiangyang district was not large, the troops that could be mobilized were as high as 10,000. All of them had been ruthlessly trained. Although they were far from the elite troops in Jiang Pingji's mind, they were far better than the troops, who were as wild as dogs and betrayed their comrades. Jiang Pingji despised them in various ways, but the others were already satisfied. They had great expectations for this army. Xiangyang district was Jiang Pingji's base camp. She wanted to conquer the entire territory of Fengyi County. Naturally, it was impossible for her to take away all her assets. Chapter 495. On this day, the wind was blowing and the clouds were scudding. The flags were fluttering in the wind. Jiang Pingji was finally going to leave the small Xiangyang district and embark on a wider and crueler stage. The troops stood in a neat formation below the drill ground. Each of them stood ramrod straight and looked straight ahead, waiting for the start of the oath-taking ceremony. For this expedition, 2,000 veteran soldiers and 2,000 new recruits were left to guard Xiangyang district. The other 3,000 elite soldiers and new recruits were sent to the battlefield. Originally, Jiang Pingji wanted to use a risky and radical method to let the new recruits stay in Xiangyang district. Her original troops and imperial guards, as well as a portion of the newly recruited recruits, would participate in the war. However, this proposal was unanimously opposed by all her subordinates. Wei Xi said, "My lord, this plan must not be carried out. Xiangyang district is a shelter that my lord has passed through. If the new recruits are stationed there, they lack experience. If the enemy takes the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, I'm afraid there will be unforeseen events. To be safe, it's better to keep some experienced veteran soldiers." After he finished speaking, he frowned. He secretly had a headache over her old temper, but he couldn't really watch her take the risk and be radical. Thinking back to her previous life, the only time she suffered a loss in the hands of Qiguanrang was when she was too happy and almost got ambushed by Qiguanrang from behind. That time, they suffered heavy losses. Almost everyone thought that she would tear Qiguanrang into pieces, but the result was unexpected. Not only did Qiguanrang, who surrendered, not die, he even became her closest confidant. She protected Qiguanrang, the strategist who surrendered voluntarily. From the beginning to the founding of the country to her death, she even gave the new emperor a warning. It was impossible for Wei Ci to say that he didn't mind it at all. Returning to his prime, Wei Ci understood this person from a different perspective. He slowly understood why Qiguan Rang received special treatment from her. It was simply because Qiguan Rang saw through the feelings beneath her ruthless appearance. Everyone said that Emperor Chen was cold and heartless, bloody and bloodthirsty, temperamental and dictatorial. But was it really so? If she was such a person, how could the Jiang dynasty be established so steadily? Under her rule for decades, the people lived and worked in peace and contentment. The troops worshipped and admired her. Even when she strongly advocated for women to enter the court and implemented various laws that were beneficial to women but detrimental to the interests of the aristocratic families, even though she encountered obstacles, it was still implemented smoothly in the end. Why had no one ever thought of rebelling against her rule and starting a new dynasty? Just because what she did was indeed for the sake of the vast majority of the people, but the minority of people who lost their interests controlled the right to speak. She was also a person who disdained fame, so she let those clowns who thought they were important jump up and down. However, humans were not saints. Too many people were influenced by the thoughts of others, but Qiguan Rang saw the truth. That's why His Majesty said, "Qiguan Wenjing is the only one who understands me in life." Is probably not enough. Being reborn, standing by her side and following her from the very beginning, Wei Ci really saw a completely different Lu Shi. This kind of emperor made him even more infatuated and adored, but that was all. He did not dare to casually profane the slightest bit. A monarch and a minister for a lifetime. It was a good ending. After some thought, Wei Ci chose an excuse that would move her, but would not provoke her to deliberately go against him. The others did the same. They had different reasons, but the core idea was the same. You can surf, but you can't be too surf. Jiang Pingji's face turned slightly green, and she clicked her tongue. In fact, she originally wanted to pull everyone out. She wanted to launch a blitzkrieg and quickly conquer the entire Fengyi County. She wanted to be a nameless but powerful county chief of Fengyi County, but she could not dissuade her subordinates. Qiguan Rang raised his eyelids and said, "After all, new soldiers are new soldiers. They lack training and combat experience. If the two armies fight, they will definitely be the ones who suffer the most losses. It's not easy to train soldiers, so it's better to bring a batch over. The rest will stay and guard the city." It was a good thing that the Lord wanted to fight, because none of the current troops were conservative. But the problem was that the Lord was unconventional. She was so reckless every day. If she was not careful, she would lose everything. Being a subordinate's heart was too agitated. Jiang Pengji clicked her tongue. "Alright, I agree." She looked at the crowd with a doting expression, as if she was looking at a group of wooden sticks. "These people are so timid. I'll listen to you little princess's decisions. Is that okay?" Jiang Pingji was dressed in military attire. She read aloud the punitive expedition against the Tsing-Yi army that Feng Jin had written. She didn't care about this kind of empty thing at all. She recited it in cadence while secretly rolling her eyes in her heart. She was there to snatch the Tsing-Yi army's territory. If she won, the territory would belong to her. Why would she have so many tricks? Why did she have to carry out justice on behalf of heaven and save the people of Fengyi County who were in dire straits? Was it necessary to beautify herself as an angel? Facts proved that it was really necessary. The phrase, "there is a justifiable reason," was not just for show. Even though she was sick of it, Jiang Pingji would not act willfully and recklessly. A nameless teacher had always been criticized by others. Even if Feng Jin was not the gunman, she would force him to write a voluminous punitive essay of a few hundred words to belittle the ancestors of the Tsing-Yi army to hell. She used the punitive essay to stimulate the morale of the troops. Next, she mobilized the troops. "Meng Hun, step forward," she shouted loudly. A burly man in his prime walked out from the troops below. He held a long knife in his hand and half knelt before Jiang Pingji on the stage. "Your subordinate is here. I appoint you as the captain of the vanguard battalion." Jiang Pingji said, "Do you have the confidence to sweep away the enemy and clear the obstacles for our army?" Your subordinate will not let you down, my lord, Meng Hun answered loudly. The silence of the drill ground was filled with a murderous aura. Li Yun, step forward. Jiang Pingji's gaze fell on Li Yun. She had high hopes for this young man. However, Li Yun was too young and his battle experience was not as experienced as Meng Hun's. He could not lead an army on his own, so he followed Meng Hun to gain experience in the vanguard battalion. Li Yun greets my lord. Without his usual adorable, naive look, the stone-faced Li Yun was like a completely different person. Every step he took was sonorous and forceful, as if every movement contained a powerful explosive force. Although he could use the silver spear in his hand to take the enemy's head, he was still able to take the enemy's head. I appoint you as the deputy captain of the vanguard battalion. You will raise the prestige of our army together with Captain Meng. The vanguard battalion was responsible for the task of scouting the path for the entire army. It was to investigate the enemy's situation and examine the terrain. They could either investigate or launch probing attacks to disrupt the enemy's formation and deployment. It could also boost their morale. Usually, the vanguard battalion was made up of the most elite troops. If there was any mistake, it would definitely cause a huge loss to the army's morale. Meng Hun sought stability and Li Yun was spirited. They were an excellent combination. She appointed Qiguan Rang as the advisor of the vanguard battalion. His style of trickery was very suitable for the vanguard battalion. Even if they were ambushed, they could turn danger into safety. Jiang Pingji and Wei Ci guarded the center of the army. Su Ku controlled the rear. Finally, Chapter 496. Jiang Nongqin? Why does this name sound like a woman's? Many soldiers were secretly suspicious. On the other hand, the elite soldiers brought by Jiang Nongqin straightened their waists one by one. The muscles on their backs tightened slightly, and they were like a tightened spring. They could not help but notice Jiang Nongqin, who stood out from the crowd in the corner. She did not wear men's clothing. She only wore clothes that were convenient for her to move around. It was different from men's clothing, but it could be seen that it was a woman's clothing. She was covered in leather armor and her long hair was curled up to the top of her head. With a cold face, she walked out from the line with firm steps and knelt on one knee. Your subordinate, Jiang Nongqin, greets you, my lord. Jiang Nongqin looked very feminine. Even though her skin looked rough after being exposed to the sun for a long time and training, her facial features could not hide the fact that she was a woman. Moreover, her figure did not look like that of a man. Now that she opened her mouth, her voice was slightly hoarse, but it was obviously a woman's voice. It further confirmed this point. It was actually a woman. Most of the soldiers widened their eyes in surprise. Even though they knew that the female battalion was not to be trifled with, they never thought that a woman could go on the general selection stage. Was this a joke? Fortunately, they remembered the instructions during training. Even though they were extremely surprised, they still maintained discipline and did not whisper to each other. The scene made Jiang Pingji's mood better. Even her voice sounded a little lighter. I appoint you as the commandant of the female battalion to assist the vanguard battalion. The size of the female battalion was close to 1,500 people. It could barely be considered a battalion. However, she did not bring the entire female battalion with her this time. She only brought 500 people. Every one of them had the most outstanding performance in the female battalion. They had seen blood on the battlefield and gained combat experience. Although it was only a commandant of 500 people, it looked a little embarrassing. Everyone did not even know the specific tasks of the female battalion. However, the fact that Jiang Nongqin was a woman, that she went on the general selection stage, and that she was appointed as a commandant was enough to stun everyone. They could only suppress their dissatisfaction. The new recruits did not dare to criticize Jiang Nongqin, nor did they dare to question her strength. The best proof was that she had the ability to go on the general selection stage. They still wanted to tremble when they thought of the female soldier who challenged all the new recruits. As for the veterans, they were disciplined. Even if they were dissatisfied, they did not dare to bring it up on such a serious occasion. Therefore, Jiang Nongqin was given the rank of a captain. The 500 women in the female battalion were only a short distance behind the vanguard battalion when they marched. The pressure of marching was great, but these young ladies were all selected from nearly 1,500 people. Every quota was snatched from the hands of their comrades. Naturally, they did not dare to be negligent, nor did they dare to miss this good opportunity to train. Sooner or later, they would have to go to the battlefield. The Tsing-yi army was just a motley crew. They had also gone through a winter of fatigue and hunger. Their numbers sounded large, but their combat power was rather weak. In addition, they had been dealing with the Red Lotus group for a long time, and their military strength had been greatly depleted. The knowledgeable female soldiers analyzed the pros and cons of this battle and came to the conclusion that if they wanted to accumulate as much experience as possible, they had to participate in this battle. The Tsing-yi army was only the beginning. In the future, there would be stronger enemies, more dangerous battlefields, and battles with higher mortality rates. As members of the female army camp in Xiangyang district, they would have to take this step sooner or later. It was better to accumulate experience from less dangerous battles, putting oneself in a hopeless situation and coming back to life. Jiang Pengji looked around and looked at everyone with disdain. Her voice was hoarse, but there was no lack of fierceness. It made everyone tense up and their hair stood on end. Let's go to war. From the beginning of autumn to the end of winter last year, Wuxian's worthless glass tea set had swindled several large sums of wealth from the northern borderline. He had exchanged a large amount of sheepskin and horses of medium quality at a low price. Jiang Pengji had also taken the opportunity to mix a lot of rice bought from the shopping center into the food that Wuxian had brought. Now, Xiangyang district could be said to have a strong army and sufficient provisions. Not to mention fighting a siege battle that they were sure to win. Even if there were a few encounters on a narrow road, they could still withstand it. Half a year had passed. Xiangyang district relied on those few colts to form their own cavalry troop. There were not many people in the cavalry battalion. There were only about 600 people. After all, not everyone was suitable to fight on horseback. The total investment to nurture a cavalry troop was not a small amount. The cavalry was mainly used to charge, break up, and cut the enemy's formation. It had a great role and status in ancient wars. Considering that the cavalry battalion was still immature and its role in a siege battle was not that strong, Jiang Pengji did not bring out this precious troop. Raising a cavalry troop really made one's flesh ache. Even a rich landlord like Jiang Pengji felt heartache. The strong wind blew and the flags fluttered. Xiangyang district slowly shrunk behind them and became a dot on the horizon. Jiang Pengji rode on White, who was so excited that it wanted to gallop. She followed them at a moderate pace. Wei Si's face was pale from the wind. Seeing that his lips had lost their color, Jiang Pengji said, "I asked you to guard the city, but you insisted on changing places with Huayu. Don't force yourself to die if you're not in good health." The original plan was for Feng Jin to accompany her to battle. Wei Si, who was not in good health, would stay at the headquarters to look after the city. However, the other party took the initiative to volunteer. He said that Feng Jin wanted to take care of his family. As a single dog, it was not a problem for him to go anywhere. Jiang Pengji glanced at Feng Jin and then at Wei Si. She thought that the two of them would fight. Who knew that Feng Jin only glanced at Wei Si leisurely. Wei Si also looked at him meaningfully. She did not know what they communicated through their eyes, but the two of them reached a consensus. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She did not understand literati like you who had complicated thoughts. Anyway, the final result was Wei Si's victory. Feng Jin stayed in Xiangyang district to look after the city. After that, she heard Qiguan Rang complain about Wei Si's treachery and that he was evil. Why? There are so many things to do in the district headquarters. If we really leave Wei Si behind, I reckon that he will not be far from death by the time we return from the expedition. Feng Jin, who was left behind to look after the city, faced with such heavy work. Could he really squeeze out time to enjoy family time with his wife and daughter? It was very risky. Jiang Pengji was speechless. What he said made sense. She actually had nothing to say. After nightfall, the whole army rested on the spot. They were not allowed to whisper to each other during the march, so the soldiers had been holding it in for a whole day. Taking advantage of the break between meals, they talked at once about Jiang Nongqin, the unprecedented female officer. How can marching and fighting a war be child's play? How can they let a woman who is not a camp prostitute sneak into the military camp? Under the repeated orders from the district headquarters, everyone knew that the female battalion did not do such improper work. None of the soldiers dared to provoke them. Then go and challenge the other party. If you win, you might be able to replace her. Bah, you have bad intentions. If I can win, I would have been a centurion long ago. Why would I still be here talking nonsense with you? They really did not dare to question Jiang Nongqin face to face. They were also clear about the training situation of the female battalion. Even the men might not be able to withstand it, but they persevered one by one. Just this point alone was enough to win their respect. However, there was still a long way to go before they acknowledged the female battalion as their comrade. The soldiers sneered. Centurion? Why don't you become a corporal first? After marching for 4 days, they were only half a day's journey away from their destination. Jiang Pengji ordered the military camp to rest for a day. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.